The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. And this is from page 180. The subhead is, the title is What We Need to Remember, the chapter title. The subhead is The Slavery, Losing Your Freedom of Civilization. In 1861, Mark Twain rode the railroad and overland stage across much of the United States, documenting his journey in a book, Roughing It, published in 1871. During a stagecoach ride near the Great Salt Lake, he encountered a group of the Shoshone-speaking Native Americans called the Ghost Suite, often referred to then by whites as the Digger Indians. Twain considered them, quote, the wretchedest type of mankind I have ever seen, end quote, and wrote, quote, they produce nothing at all. They have no villages, no gatherings together into strictly defined tribal communities, a people whose only shelter is a rag cast on a bush to keep off a portion of the snow, and yet who inhabit one of the most rocky, wintry, repulsive wastes that our country or any other man can exhibit. The Bushmen and the Gashoots are manifestly descended from the self-same gorilla or kangaroo or Norway rat, whichever animal Adam the Darwinians trace them to, end of quote. Even to this day, many people who have not bothered to study the Shoshone or other hunter-gatherer people imagine them in much of the same way Mark Twain did. Books and movies over the years have implied that their lives must be a continuous wretched struggle to find food from day to day, and that their cultures and religions hardly qualify as either. In that belief, however, Twain and many modern people are wrong. If the highest goal of contemporary civilization is to have leisure time, free from the demands of providing for food and shelter, so that one may then contemplate the great mysteries of life, then the Shoshone had achieved the pinnacle of success. Our culture teaches that civilizations like city-states come about as a result of technological innovations such as agriculture, giving people more free time. With this free time, the story goes, they produce art, literature, religion, and explore the cosmos. Primitive cultures don't have these things because they don't have the time for them. In fact, these represent two of our most deadly myths. Leisure time. Every empirical study of both historic and contemporary cultures finds that the more complex and hierarchical a culture is, the harder the people in it must work and the more frantic their lives are. Just look at how many hours a week the average middle management executive works, about 60, and how many families have two 40-hour-per-week workers devoting 80 hours a week to paying the mortgage and feeding the family. Only a very small class of people within the city-state enjoys the leisure time state of freedom, its economic and political rulers. And because the ruling class is not producing food, those who are food producers must spend extra time making food for those who are not. The Shoshone require the same average 2,000 calories of food energy every day as do any other humans. However, they expend on average only 2 hours a day to acquire it, because they were a nomadic people who moved from place to place following their food supply. As the seasons changed and food became scarce in one place, they simply moved to another. If one food wasn't available, they knew where and how to find another. Toronto University professor Richard Lee found that the similarly structured tribal group, the Kung of the Kalahari Desert in Africa, spent less than 15 hours a week, 2 hours a day, attending to gathering food and the other necessities of life. The rest of the time, he said, they played, told stories, and made music. John Yellen of the National Science Foundation found the same to be true of the Hottentots, another hunter-gatherer group in Africa. The Shoshone had an elaborate and meaningful culture and religion. They generally did not suffer from famines or plagues. They had lived comfortably and happily on their land for at least several thousand, perhaps as many as 10,000 years, keeping the land as clean and pure and productive as it could be in that desert and mountain region, living harmoniously with their neighbors. At the time Mark Twain took his ride through their territory, the Shoshone had accomplished, over 1,000 years, a second achievement, which is regularly touted by our leaders as the highest goal of humankind. They had eliminated warfare. There was not even a word for war in their language. The Shoshone lived a tribal life in one of the most desolate parts of North America, with a population density that ranged from one person every 50 square miles to one person every 100 square miles. A typical tribal unit was a single extended family of 5 to 20 people, and they traveled at a leisurely pace across a wide area. On those rare occasions when others, including whites, came to attack them, they simply ran away and hid. The occasions for attack were rare, largely because the Shoshone accumulated no wealth. They had no systems for preserving and storing food, minerals, or anything other than what they could carry. In this regard, they were not poor. Their lives were comfortable, their family interactions meaningful, and their food supply ample. A symbol of this is found in the highest status act a Shoshone could commit in the presence of others, to give them what he had. Generosity is how one achieves social standing among the Shoshone, whereas the accumulation and control of surplus food and possessions were how whites achieved social status. They were called the diggers by whites because they often dug in the ground for roots and food. Whites assumed this implied some sort of agricultural stupidity, but in fact the Shoshone had a deep and rich knowledge of life in their environment, both above and below the ground. They used a sacred digging stick to extract food, and it was both manufactured and transported with ritual and ceremony. If a stone had to be moved, a different type of stick was used. When a Shoshone looked out at the natural world, she saw a landscape rich with life, both visible and hidden. That life was known to her, called to her, spoke to her, and often guided her. Last Hours of Ancient Thought.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Wow, Donald Trump is either certifiably nuts, not more than 11 years old emotionally, or a brilliant tactician who has figured out a way to distract America from the fact that his EPA chief is approving pesticides that cause birth defects and damage children, and that he's rolling back the streams of America, the waterways of America rule that protects 1/3 of our water, or that his first executive action was to allow coal companies to dump more crap in our rivers, or that he has basically gone back on every campaign promise he's made, or that the Republican so-called healthcare giant tax cut for the billionaires bill is being reformulated today. And if there's anything he wants to distract us from, that's probably it. But he went nuts this morning, and I can't figure out why. This guy is 71 years old. He's had a lifetime of experience. He should understand some basic stuff. But what is it with Donald Trump and women? I mean, yesterday, or was it the day before yesterday, he's talking to the brand new Irish Prime Minister, and there's an attractive woman who is a highly respected Irish reporter. She's as good as any man. And there's this, and in fact, far more famous than most. And she's in this group with a whole bunch of Irish reporters, but she sure is pretty, right? A pretty blonde. And Donald Trump is like, oh, look at her. Come on over here. Say hi to your prime minister. She's got a pretty smile. And then today, he tweets out this. I heard poorly rated Morning Joe speaks badly of me. Don't watch anymore. Right. That's why because just before he tweeted this, Joe and Mika had been talking about how Trump was acting like he was nuts. Anyhow, don't watch anymore. Then how come low IQ crazy Mika, along with psycho Joe, came to Mar-a-Lago 3 nights in a row around New Year's Eve and insisted on joining me? She was bleeding badly from a facelift. I said no. Amazing. I just the tweets in response have been incredible. I mean, there's just some it's actually some very good content there. But what do you think is going on? Is he losing it? Is it time to roll out the 25th Amendment? Is it time for the cabinet to get together and say, you know, this guy's gone? I mean, he's the president of the United States, the most powerful person in the world, the nuclear codes, all this stuff, and he's sitting around tweeting about how a TV star had a facelift as revenge for something she's saying on television about it? Really? Mark Kornblau tweets, I never imagined a day when I would think to myself, it is beneath my dignity to respond to the President of the United States. Lindsey Graham, Republican senator from South Carolina, tweeted, Mr. President, your tweet was beneath the office and represents what is wrong with American politics, not the greatness of America. Senator Ben Sass, Republican of Nebraska, says, please, just stop. This isn't normal, and it's beneath the dignity of your office. Now, here's the really bizarre thing. Melania, Trump's wife, has created a one-product portfolio or a one-position portfolio. Her job as First Lady is to stop cyberbullying. I think she needs to have a conversation with her apparently crazed husband. And then Sarah Sanders comes out on Fox So-Called News and says, Trump is the real victim here. He's being bullied by the liberal media. Yeah, that's her exact phrase. She said, look, I don't think the president's ever been someone who gets attacked and doesn't push back. There have been an outrageous number of personal attacks, not just to him, but to, frankly, everyone around him. Right. And therefore, but here's this, David Ferguson compiled some of the really great tweet responses over at Raw Story. Lee Perry. Well, to be fair, no one in the Trump family has had plastic surgery or facelift. Right. Didn't Donald beat up his first wife, according to at least one biographer, and a divorce deposition? Beat her up, and according to her at the time, she's since recalled to rape her because he had a hair surgical procedure that went wrong that Ivana wanted him to have or something like that. I seem to recall that. Anyhow, I'm not sure if the tweet is referring to that or not. Heidi Hall says, I feel like turning away a badly bleeding celebrity from a luxury hotel may be the best way to explain his party's health care bill to the 1%. Yeah, that makes sense. Ruth Malone tweets, criminy, it's midweek, and he's tweeting about a facelift? How long are Speaker Ryan and Mitch McConnell going to run this bad reality show? Right. Glenn Thrush says, quick reaction from 2 GOP Hill staffers to Trump attack on Mika. How does this help pass health care when he needs Murkowski and Collins, 2 women of a certain age? Johnson says, when the president uses valuable presidential time to publicly trash on someone about a past facelift. Judd Legume says, the only thing we need to fear is fear itself, quoting FDR. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, quoting JFK. She was bleeding badly from a facelift. I said no, quoting Trump. Michael Scheer, I tweeted this morning, what's with Trump's weird fascination with bleeding women? Remember the whole Megyn Kelly thing? She had blood coming out of her nose. She had blood coming out of her. Michael Scheer says, I'm waiting for the debate over whether menstrual blood insults or face blood insults are more sexist. Robert Caruso says, as a practical matter, I spent my teenage years in and around Los Angeles, and I've never seen someone bleeding after a facelift. Sean Linsky says, the President of the United States started his day by attacking the quality of a facelift that a cable TV host had, but Hillary was worse, of course. Sharon Becker tweets, just a reminder, had Obama tweeted about a morning TV host's facelift, Republicans would go nuts. Well, they wouldn't just be going nuts. They would be calling for impeachment. Mike Granaham tweeted this to Ivanka. He says, your father publicly insulted a woman and accused her of bleeding badly from a facelift. Care to comment on the message that sends to girls? Andrew Tumulty. It is now the official White House position that a woman had a poorly done facelift. Feeling great yet, America? Dante Atkins. Let's assume Trump's correct. Mika's bleeding from a facelift. Trump's response was not, are you okay? It was, you can't come with me. And then Laura Gorgonis tweets, she was bleeding badly from a facelift for 3 days? A real man would have called an ambulance. Are you lying or less than a man?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is bizarre. I mean, it may be, you know, another P.T. Barnum stunt to grab the news cycle. If so, apparently he's done that. Is it going to do him any good? Welcome back. Let's see here. Carol, watching Free Speech TV in Monessen, Pennsylvania. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind today?
I am beyond appalled. I mean, when are we going to get this obscene creature out of our White House? Yeah. He's taking our country down. It's so embarrassing. It's so horrible. I just, you know, I don't understand. What is he going to have to do for them to say enough? That's my question.
Well, it's a very good question, and the 25th Amendment to the United States Constitution places the responsibility for doing something about this with the cabinet first and foremost. And it hang on just a second here. Let me find it. Article. Oh, these are the articles. These are not the amendments. Sorry. Amendment 25. Yeah, here we go. Whenever the vice president and a majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments or of such body as Congress may by law provide, transmit to the president pro tem of the Senate and Speaker of the House of Representatives a written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the vice president shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office as acting president. And, you know, that's you know, it's like, I don't know where else to go with this. It's like, this is so bizarre, Carol.
It's beyond belief. I mean, we have a president who is embarrassing us, humiliating us across in front of the entire world. Yeah. It's beyond belief.
Well said. Well said. Carol, thank you for watching Free Speech TV, and thank you for your call. I totally agree. Randy in Ottawa, Iowa. Hey, Randy. Thanks for watching Free Speech on Dish. What's up?
God, I tell you, I called today because I feel like a lot of other citizens. I mean, I've heard citizens in tears on C-SPAN and about this Senate bill and for health care and people worried and wringing their hands, and it's all been fixed right from the get-go. I live in Iowa, so you know what's been going on here.
Yeah.
And with the privatization of Medicaid, the private carriers are back looking for more money, and the state's digging into the rainy day fund now.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to do was I wanted to encourage. When I hang up, I'm going to call Senator Grassley and Senator Ernst again after the congressional bill passed the Congress. I wrote them letters over that, but I'm going to call them again today, and I want to encourage everyone listening. I know it's vacation time and everything else, that we need to keep the pressure up on them to save lives and to save our country.
Yeah.
And I love you, Tom.
Yeah. Thank you, Randy. Back at you. It is a serious time. And do you think, Randy, the Trump's tweets this morning about Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough were designed to were strategically designed to distract us from the healthcare discussion? Or do you think he's just gone off the rails?
Well, I think you have a point, and I think that I won't say that he thinks he's crazy like a fox. That's what I think.
Right.
And
I agree.
And these deceptive things that he pulls, what's got me really worried that's on the burner isn't healthcare. It's what's going on in Syria.
Yeah, and the larger Middle East, actually. Yeah, I agree. Randy, thank you. Good talking to you. We'll be back. Hey, Thom Hartmann here with the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hi, I'm Valerie with Free Speech TV. We're proud to provide you with independent, unfiltered news and documentaries. And as our valued viewer, you can help us continue bringing Free Speech TV well into the future. Join our Pearly Gate Rebels, our planned giving program. Your gift of any size will help ensure democracy endures through an informed citizenry. You can donate property, money, or assets. It's easy. My spouse and I are proud Pearly Gate Rebels. We're doing our part to ensure that Free Speech TV will be here to deliver thought-provoking news and information well into the future. Join us. Call 877-378-8669 or email me at valerie@freespeech.org. Rebel against media owned by billionaires and become one of our Pearly Gate Rebels today.
Back, Thom Hartmann here with you. Boy, what a day. Is this, Donald Trump was once asked his favorite book, and he said, The Art of Money Getting by P.T. Barnum. Now, I actually went out and bought the book and read it because I was curious, what it's not a big book. It's like 50 pages. You can buy it online. And it's a self-help book. It's kind of an early version of Dale Carnegie. It's like, set goals and achieve them. Live with ethical standards. Be nice to people. You never know who you're going to meet going down on, who you met on the way up and stuff like that. I mean, it's just like good common sense kind of practical self-help business advice from the late 19th century. And, but P.T. Barnum was the master at grabbing the news cycle. Is that what's going on? Is Donald Trump trying to distract us from the behind-the-scenes stuff that the Republicans are doing right now so that they can hold a vote tomorrow on Trump care and hand a $600 billion tax cut to the Koch brothers and all their buddies to the billionaires of money? Is that what's going on? Andy in Wilmington, Delaware. Hey, Andy, what's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Look,
sure.
This behavior of Trump's, I have seen many, many times. I've worked in let's call it the main line of Philadelphia for my entire life in a professional capacity. I've been around these folks professionally all this time.
I don't know what the main line means.
Well, let's say the western suburbs, Bryn Mawr, Ardmore.
So the upper middle class neighborhoods, largely white neighborhoods, is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very wealthy folks. And this especially applies to those that are born into money. I've seen this kind of behavior many, many times. People in power, and especially with money, are surrounded by sycophants that, first of all, will placate their every desire for want of influence, want of gaining some kind of favors. I mean, it's almost
not to mention a paycheck.
Yeah. So when you see this kind of insulting behavior, I have seen black people working for some of these folks called the N-word to their face. And this kind of sexist kind of behavior is not uncommon among those who have never had to pay for it in any way for their entire lives. They have gotten away with it. They've
never had to pay for their bad behavior. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They've been given a pass, and Trump is. You
still there, Andy? Andy, your phone just collapsed. I think you must have, if you're listening on Sirius XM, you must have driven into a dead zone or something. But I thank you. But your comments make perfect sense. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's up?
Hey, Tom, not too much. I've had a hard time getting anybody to agree with me on Trump, and I think I finally figured it out just the other day. And his tweets have never surprised me because for years, you know, I've listened to, like, Politically, the Alex Bennett show until he went just fully online. And also I listened to Howard Stern, and Trump's been a big topic on both of those shows for a long time. So his actual behavior doesn't really surprise me. And
yeah, it's like he's still on the Howard Stern show.
Right. And his behavior is very, you know, he's just very coarse. I mean, he has no, like, internal monologue. I mean, he just says whatever pops into his head.
Well, it was on Howard Stern where he talked about his daughter in some fairly sexual ways and allowed Howard Stern to, too, and laughed along with him. I mean, it's...
creepy.
So this is apparently, you know, what you see is what you get. You know, we should have known when the Access Hollywood tapes came out that this is this guy, you know, he's a sexist pig. I mean, I don't know how to say it other than that.
No, there is no other way to say it. And here's what really connected everything for me. Jill Stein, Dr. Jill Stein, she did an interview over the weekend with Smirkanish. And she said Smirkanish was trying to nail her down on did she ruin the election for Hillary, right? For voters.
Right.
And Dr. Stein said 1/3 of the Greens voted for Trump. Now, I think what that is there is a political science orthodoxy that says Trump voters are just and Trump supporters are just simply desperate and misunderstood, and you can win them over. That's the part I reject. Yeah. I don't think they are desperate and misunderstood. I think they're a big part of the problem. And Trump is really, I mean, when I observe his behavior, he's really dangerous. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, what I'm seeing, Dave, and in fact, we had this conversation last night. Louise and I and a friend of ours. You know, living in as I do in a community with a lot of retired military, I was surprised by how many of those folks supported Bernie in the primaries and then voted for Trump. And when you go back and ask them, the answer is, I wanted to vote for the authenticity. I wanted a person who wasn't going to BS me. I wanted a person who wasn't speaking in legal phrases, and focus group tested statements and things. And so I figured Trump was the real deal. Now, obviously, they got scammed, and a lot of them are realizing that right now, and some of them are seriously pissed off. But I think that that's what it was, frankly, Trump promised he wasn't going to touch Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. He promised he was going to end the job-killing trade deals, and now he's sucking up to President Xi in China. He promised he was going to stop the stupid wars overseas, and instead he's ramping up our involvement in Afghanistan and putting us at the edge of a nuclear war with Russia over Syria. I mean, he lied. But the guy is a really, really effective con man. I mean, with Trump University, with everything else, he's a really effective, he's a good salesman, as probably most sociopaths are, or at least most high-functioning sociopaths are. So, anyhow, Dave, thank you for the call. I agree with your sentiments on steroids. Thank you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
On steroids. Now, there's a bad pun for a day that Donald Trump is going all male toxic on us. We'll be back. Katrina vanden Heuvel is going to be with us. Stick around.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from We the People. This is an illustrated book. It's, illustrated kind of like a comic book. It's very, very readable, but it's serious stuff. This is from page 10. War is the Enemy is the chapter. George Orwell's idea in his novel 1984 that perpetual war was a masterful technique for repressing the masses was not new. On April 20th, 1795, James Madison, who helped shepherd through the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and would become President of the United States in the following decade, wrote, Of all the enemies to public liberty, war is perhaps the most to be dreaded because it comprises and develops the germ of every other. War is the parent of armies, and from these proceed debts and taxes. And armies and debts and taxes are the known instruments for bringing the many under the domination of the few. Reflecting on war's impact on the presidency, Madison continued his letter about the dangerous and intoxicating powers of war. In war, too, the discretionary power of the presidency is extended. Its influence in dealing out offices, favors, and emoluments, profits, is multiplied, and all the means of seducing the minds are added to those of subduing the force of the people. The same malignant aspect in republicanism may be traced in the inequality of fortunes and the opportunities of fraud growing out of a state of war, and in the degeneracy of manners and morals engendered by both. No nation, Madison concluded, could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. Once the Revolutionary War was over and the Constitution had been worked out and presented to the states for ratification, Thomas Jefferson turned his attention to what he and Madison felt was a terrible inadequacy in the new Constitution. It didn't explicitly stipulate the natural rights of the new nation's citizens, and it didn't protect against the rise of new commercial monopolies like the East India Company, which had once dominated life in the colonies and used the British Army as its own private army. On December 20th, 1787, Jefferson wrote to James Madison about his concerns regarding the Constitution. He said bluntly that it was deficient in several areas. Quote, "I will now tell you what I do not like. First, the omission of a Bill of Rights, providing clearly and without the aid of sophism for freedom of religion, freedom of the press, protection against standing armies, restriction of commercial monopolies, the eternal and unremitting force of the habeas corpus laws, and trials by jury in all manners of fact triable by the laws of the land and not by the laws of nations." When the United States was first declared independent in 1776, its founders knew humans had previously faced tyranny in the form of despotic kings and inquisitional churches. The Bill of Rights firmly declared that no church could ever again control a democratic government. And the Declaration of Independence made it clear right from the beginning that when citizens are burdened by, quote, a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government. Thus, the founders and the framers disposed of despotism by church or state, guaranteeing the absolute and inviolable rights of a nation's citizens to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But there was a third entity that Thomas Jefferson and others worried may also one day rise to seize control of the government and enslave the people. James Madison wrote, "There is an evil which ought to be guarded against in the indefinite accumulation of property from the capacity of holding it in perpetuity by corporations. The power of all corporations ought to be limited in this respect. Their growing wealth acquired by them never fails to be a source of abuses." In 1787, Jefferson proposed an additional amendment to the Bill of Rights to restrain corporations, calling for a constitutional amendment to, quote, ban monopolies in commerce, although it failed under the Federalist opposition of the Hamilton-Adams faction. In arguing for a ban on commercial monopolies, the founders, who had just fought a war of independence against both Britain and the world's largest transnational corporation, the East India Company, whose tea they'd thrown into Boston Harbor, knew the danger of corporations becoming so powerful they could influence government the way the East India Company had persuaded England for a tax reduction and free trade agreement that came to be known as the Tea Act of 1773. But it's not just Madison and Jefferson's remarkable foresight that's warning us about war. More recent presidents have also noted the danger of a corporate usurpation of democracy, particularly when fed by the bloody meat of war. As he was leaving office in 1961, President Dwight Eisenhower looked back over his years as president, as general, as supreme commander of the Allied forces in France during World War II, and noted that the Cold War had brought a new Orwellian type of war to the American landscape, a perpetual war supported by a perpetual war industry. It was the confluence of the two things that Jefferson had warned against and had tried to ban in his first proposed version of the Bill of Rights. In a nationally televised speech, Eisenhower spoke in sobering terms about this. He said, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development. Yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the structure of our very society. He was talking about the military-industrial complex. It continues from there. The book is We the People. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and I'm super happy to have with us on the line Katrina vanden Heuvel, the editor and publisher of The Nation magazine. She writes a weekly column for The Washington Post. One of the, in my opinion, one of the most brilliant and insightful reporters and commentators of our era. Katrina, welcome back to the program.
Tom, I don't know if I can continue after that introduction. Thank you very much.
It is heartfelt.
Muster strength in these times.
Yeah, it is heartfelt. By the way, people can reach you at, they can tweet you at Katrina Nation. And
come to thenation.com.
Right.
And yeah, absolutely.
Right. So
I have to say, I think Twitter in our time has been hyper covered if it's the tweeter in chief, and it's deformed and debased some of our coverage. But Twitter in general, if it's not too vitriolic, directs one to a lot of interesting things.
Yeah,
so.
I agree. In fact, apropos of that, before we get into your recent commentaries on media malpractice and Trump's overseas escalations, I've been wondering out loud whether Trump's tweet this morning attacking Mika Brzezinski for having a facelift and saying that she was bleeding, his weird obsession with blood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is this, and women, is this, do you think that this is some, maybe just in his mind, but some brilliant strategic effort to redirect our attention away from the healthcare / tax cut for billionaire debacle? Or is this?
First of all, I have to say I have not followed that tweet. You know, it is a measure that even an extraordinary, I mean, you have to follow it. But yeah, no, I think a few months ago, the New York Times did a story asking journalists about Trump's tweets. What do you do with it? I think the hyper coverage feeds into Trump's ability, and it's something I cite at the top of my column on military escalation, which is what Naomi Klein writes in her latest book. This kind of rolling shock of distraction, of directing people to kind of these, distractions, keeps one from keeping one's eyes on the prize, which is the breakdown of what I hate to call healthcare, because it's essentially a tax cut wrapped up in taking away healthcare from millions of people. But yeah, I think it's there's an ugliness to the tweets about women.
Yeah.
You brought that up.
Have you not read the tweet this morning? I'd be glad to read it to you.
Please.
Let me share it with you, because this is beyond the pale. He tweeted, "I heard poorly rated Morning Joe speaks badly of me. I don't watch anymore. Then how come low IQ crazy Mika, along with Psycho Joe, came to Mar-a-Lago 3 nights in a row around New Year's Eve and insisted on joining me? She was bleeding badly from a facelift, so I said no."
God, it's so ugly.
Yeah, I mean, I've never.
My stomach churns listening to that, to think that this man. It's debased on so many levels, and it's so narcissistic. These tweets come out of a psychic place of a man who just has to hit back and be ugly to particularly women, but to all people. So I hadn't read it, and I'm kind of shocked. And I will add one other thing. I mean, Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, the whole issue of being at Mar-a-Lago, it's a question of access journalism, what was going on.
Sure.
But I'd also say, Mika Brzezinski's father died just a few weeks ago. What's he doing talking about her, any woman in that way? It's really ugly.
Yeah. It
debases it. I mean, take the Twitter feed account from him, really. I mean, there is a powerful, ugly tool at work here, Tom, and you alluded to it. Fox is another vehicle for this guy, but he knows that he has in his tweets this direct connection with millions of people, and it's very powerful and very dangerous. I do believe it's helpful sometimes. Social media can avoid the media gatekeepers. We saw that with Bernie Sanders' campaign, where there was really a welter of great ideas of inclusive populism, of trying to speak to millions of people when the mainstream media, corporate media, wouldn't carry his message. But social media used in the ways Trump is using it shows how debased it can get.
Yeah, I'm just, like I said, I've been wondering out loud, does he think this is some kind of brilliant strategy to distract us from all the awful stuff that his administration is doing? I mean, Scott Pruitt just approved a pesticide that causes birth defects in rats and mice. If it's just in the same room with pregnant mothers, not even ingested by, I mean,
we're looking at it, I mean, the other, Trump, with all the sham populist talk, is essentially a shameless plutocrat who is just doing the trickle down, rolling back, tax cuts for the rich, filling the swamp with Goldman Sachs executives, hitting on the most vulnerable, and failing. I think what's important, and I do think Trump knows this in his narcissistic being, he's failing his own supporters.
Yes.
And you get that kind of ambivalent, weird, schizophrenic reaction, like, the healthcare bill, House healthcare bill is mean, and he's not really, doesn't care that much about what comes out, but he's violating promises, whether it's on no cuts to Medicare, no cuts to Medicaid, whether it's about staying out of the Middle East, not getting bogged down, avoiding regime change. I mean, these are promises he made to people, his supporters, and now he's trashing them all.
Yeah. So, you're the media. I mean, you publish The Nation magazine. I'm the media, I guess, or in the media, with this radio and TV show. How do we react to this, and how should the larger media react to it? It's almost like it's something we've never seen before. It's to the best of my knowledge.
There's been hate. I think you were talking before, Tom, in interesting ways about the history of how we got here, the media history,
right.
The rollback of the Fairness Doctrine, the cuts to reporting, the cost of foreign bureaus. I mean, I think we go back to 101 as best we can. I mean, reporting on issues, reporting on substance, not letting distraction take us to scandal and palace intrigue, trying to get to systemic root issues. It's tough because you also need, even where we sit, we need to, for example, talk about the tweet, today. But maybe there's a way to unpack that and look at his policies toward women, the policies taking rights away from those who have mental health issues, looking real tough at substantive policy issues. My gripe in that column I wrote on media malpractice, a theme you and I have talked a lot about, and it was something that, we've seen for years, but it played out in 2016, where there was so little attention to policy issues. When I say policy issues, it's not something sterile, I hope. I mean, it's really issues that affect people's lives. And there was so much given to scandal. One, I think it turns people off of engagement. They become more participants. I mean, more spectators than participants. And, it leads people not to mobilize if they don't know what's happening to the gutting of healthcare or the gutting of climate or what's happening in military escalations that will send young men and women to Afghanistan, young men and women who might not even have been born around 9/11 when we launched that war. These are things that I think we need to keep coming back to and not losing sight of as too much of the media churn, particularly cable news these days. We can talk about the ratings war. I think has become too fixated on the scandals, ignoring some of the real scandals, like what you just said about Pruitt, EPA, rollback, how that'll lead to deaths. There's a lot of scandal coverage which isn't as necessary.
Yeah. Why do you think I suspect I know the answer, but why our media our corporate media is more interested in reporting on interpersonal scandals than on policy scandals, when policy scandals actually kill people and interpersonal scandals typically, have been the province of the National Enquirer?
Well, interpersonal scandals have also been the province of Beltway journalism for years, right? Who's up, who's down, the turf.
Yeah.
Often it doesn't mean much to people outside the Beltway, but there is that obsession. But I think it goes back in a large measure to what we've witnessed over the last few decades, which is the conglomeratization, the Murdochization, the profitization, the commodification of news. And I think, it's like this kind of, I'm not sure it's the obliteration, we've talked about this, but it's certainly the real blurring of lines between entertainment and news that leads people to fix on people. Now, I agree that we need to, when we do policy coverage, it should be human. It should have narrative stories. It have people and how people are affected, not just a story about a chemical that's been deregulated. But look, for example, at what's happened in the UK in the last 2 weeks. That burning tower. Can you think of anything more horrific and dramatic? That, to me, is the symbol of the consequences of deregulation. Deregulation that has been on offer and driven by conservative governments in Britain, and certainly part of what we're witnessing in the landscape today, and has been the agenda mostly of Republicans, but not only, over the last 40 years or so. Deregulation kills people, costs people's lives. And I think that story needs to have a human face to it. And that's not sensationalism, I don't believe, if you're illuminating a larger, more systemic problem. But it will engage people to learn more and read more about policy, systemic, deep issues.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the very best ways to cover policy, and we're seeing so little of it now. Just, real quickly, where do you see this whole tax cut for billionaires going? It seems to me that, the Koch network and the other billionaires who are so offended by this 3.8% tax on their already low 20% capital gains income tax. And by the way, you've got to earn $250,000 a year in capital gains before you even start paying that additional 3.8%. So this really is a tax only paid by really rich people, right, that is used to fund the Medicaid expansion and Obamacare. It seems to me that these billionaires who have been funding the Republican Party all along are saying this is the price, if you want to get reelected, if you want us to throw, 30, 40, 50 million bucks into your next election campaign, give me my tax break so I get that $100 million back and I make a profit on it.
I wish I could be more hopeful. I do believe organized people at town halls and rallies around this country will show what they think of this tax cut, this odious health care bill. But I do think, Tom, something you've spent so much time talking about, fighting against, the corrosion of our democracy by money. This Supreme Court's not about to do anything democratic. And I do think we're witnessing, we talk a lot about the dangers of corruption and oligarchy and plutocracy abroad. Yeah. But as Bernie Sanders and others have raised, are we a democracy or are we an oligarchy? I think we need to raise that question in human terms. And I think, the progressive ideas like Medicare for all have real support. But until we can get billionaires out of the process, it's tough. The alternative is to get a few billionaires at this moment until we have clean money, public financing of elections nationally. But to, wage a full-out battle for progressive ideas, which some, people with resources fully understand is good for a sustainable, healthy, democratic, functioning democracy. But it's really, it's so odious that there's a retroactive tax cut on investment income in this bill. First of all, and I'll stop, but it is so the injustice that the tax rates for investment income are lower than that for just basic labor. Yeah, it's crazy to begin with, and what made these people so. And by the way, it was on this program that Jimmy Carter came on and he said, we're no longer a democracy, we are an oligarchy with unlimited political bribery. I mean, full stop. I mean, he just came right out and said it. And that was 2 years ago. And I think more and more people are, listen, the former president says it, more and more people, I think, Warren Buffett in his own way, complex. People are getting it. Yeah. Katrina, we're out of time. But Katrina Vanden Heuvel, The Nation, at Katrina Nation. Thank you, Katrina. Thank you, Tom.
Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Katrina Vanden Heuvel, the editor-publisher of The Nation magazine, TheNation.com. You can tweet her at Katrina Nation. We'll be back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So, you know, might these tweets by Donald Trump be showing that he's actually exhibiting the signs of mental illness? Is it time for the 25th Amendment? Or, like I said, is this just a desperate attempt to distract us all from the insane damage that the Republicans are doing and provide me with another great excuse or opportunity to go through a list of all the insane things that the Trump administration are doing? I mean, I was just looking for a piece of legislation the other day, the Waters of the United States rule that President Obama put into place that has been that is being attacked by the Trump administration. It's been suspended by the Trump administration. And I went onto the government website where you find this stuff, and I had to go through like 4 or 5 different links just to find it, just to get to it. I mean, it was that bad. Anyway, Robert, watching Free Speech TV in Milford, California. Hey, Robert, what's on your mind today?
Hey, that was pretty quick. Let me take you off speaker real fast.
Sure.
And, well, this is why I called. And this is why I think Trump can operate with impunity. I believe that because of Trump, a great majority of humanity will be lost or killed. And I think the horse is out of the gate and the finish line is close at hand, closer than we think. And I believe Trump is the beast. And lying is lying, and shafting is humanity is Trump's.
Are you suggesting, Robert, that what we're seeing is biblical, that this is Revelation 7?
I think it's all a revelation.
Wow.
That's what I really think, because it just all matches. If you read, it's like, what will happen next? Well, do you want to watch whatever that TV show about the White House is about, or do you want to watch, or do you want to read the Bible and find out what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Your choice, Game of Thrones or Revelation. It all ends up the same, I guess. Although I've only seen 1 episode of Game of Thrones, so I really don't know. But you're of the opinion. You said you think that Trump can get away with pretty much anything. Why?
Because do you know who the beast is?
In Revelation,
the Antichrist.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've read it 4 times.
The dragon is the devil and all that.
Right.
Well, basically.
And then there's the Whore of Babylon in there too.
Huh?
There's the Whore of Babylon in there too. I mean, I remember back when Reagan was president, he was negotiating with Gorbachev. There were a bunch of fundamentalist Christians who were flipped out because the name of the beast is the name of a number, and the number is 777. And Ronald Wilson Reagan is 7 letters in each one of the 3 letters of his name, 3 words of his name. So his name is, 666, 6 letters in each. Thank you, Chris. 666.
It's wrong.
And then the beast is supposed to be negotiating with the whore, and the whore is, I hate that word, but you know it's in the Bible. Yeah. Has a horn, right? And Gorbachev had that birthmark marked like a horn, and so there were a bunch of Christians who were all freaked out that this is the end of times, you know, you know, well, it wasn't the end of times. I mean, it was the end of the American middle class, but it was not the end of time. But anyway, Robert, thank you for the call. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Network. It's always, I always enjoy discussing the Bible, frankly. Anyhow, we'll be back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. AJ in Savannah, Georgia. Hey, AJ, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, great. I love what you do. It's been very interesting on hold listening to all this. When you were talking about the tweets, social media, probably a good thing for everyone because it would just infuriate me to read some of the stuff that he puts out there. But, you know, in any kind of job, if you talk or act like that, it's grounds for, termination.
If one of my employees said this in public about another employee, frankly, even in private in my presence, they would no longer be an employee. And I hope that doesn't sound too autocratic, but I think that that's probably true of any rational employer in the United States. And
right.
Trump is our employee.
It's just good business. It's good business for, to have that kind of ethic about what you do. And I don't see any ethics in what he does. There's nothing that is, or at least what he shows to the world on Twitter and on the screen. And I really think the press should just boycott the press briefings because it's just hogwash anyway. Yeah. And they have better things to do with their time. They could, go out and interview congressmen and senators and, things like that actually, want to get some things done.
Yeah. Well said. AJ, thank you for the call. Very, very well said. Dave in Northampton, Massachusetts, listening to WHMP. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, Tom, it's good to talk to you.
Thank you.
I'd like to expand the discussion just a bit and run some numbers by you. George W. Bush, Mitt Romney, John McCain, and Donald Trump all won the votes of married white women by about 54%. And even this guy, Ken Cuccinelli, remember, the guy that ran against
Mr. Ultrasound,
Virginia. He's like Mr. Transvaginal Ultrasound. He also won that demographic by right around 54%.
Right.
And maybe you had some insights into that because I sure don't.
I don't.
I don't understand, why that demographic consistently goes Republican, even for a guy like Donald Trump, who is, so misogynistic.
Yeah, I don't, Dave. I have no explanation for it, and I don't think it's because I'm a clueless male, although that's not always possible. I don't understand why, and I don't understand, frankly, why any woman would vote Republican right now. It's just anyhow. Dave, maybe some of our listeners, particularly maybe some of our white female married listeners. Who voted for Donald Trump would like to call and tell us why. I would love to hear it. Dave, thanks for the call. Laura in Chicago. Hey, Laura, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hi. Tom, I have some real experience here, and I just really get angry at this conversation about who voted for Trump and who didn't vote for Trump, because if you remember back to the election, first of all, Hillary was backing the TPP, even though she said she didn't. She actually sent one of her aides to Australia during the DNC to make sure the Australian PM knew that she still backed the TPP.
Right.
And Obama was campaigning for it all the way through the election.
Yep.
So there are
which did not help Hillary's case at all.
Bingo. And there are people out here whose jobs have been decimated that were so angry, and they were not going to vote for Hillary when and Obama's agenda when they had already decimated their communities. I heard it. So
is that the 54% of married white women who voted for Trump? They were not voting for Donald Trump. They were voting for a change in trade policy that would bring their and their husbands' jobs back home.
They wanted their jobs back home.
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes perfect sense.
Wanted their jobs.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. Okay, Laura, thank you. Thank you very much for the call. It just, I think Laura's nailed it. And I think it was Dave who called before. It should have been right at the tip of my tongue. It's like I said, Louise and I were having this conversation last night. It's like Donald Trump ran essentially as a Democrat, promising to support all the Democratic programs, including fair trade as opposed to free trade. But he lied.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. And it's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today I'm reading from The Prophet's Way, A Guide to Living in the Now. It's actually a compilation of mostly, there's some commentary in there, but mostly it's diaries and letters that I sent to friends on travels around the world, and it's kind of a autobiography, I suppose, of sorts. This is from chapter, I don't know what the chapter number is. It's titled Life in a Teepee. It's on page 25. And it starts with a quote from Lenny Bruce. Every day people are straying away from the church and going back to God. My best friend through school was Clark Stinson. We met when we were 13, and instead of pursuing the normal pastimes of teenagers, we spent our time studying Sanskrit. We had an old study guide book I found in my father's library, reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead and arguing minutiae from the Bible. Clark's mother was interested in metaphysics and shared a book called Autobiography of a Yogi with us. Years later, when I went to Detroit with her and Clark to attend an initiation in Kriya Yoga by Yogacharya Oliver Black, the oldest living disciple of Yogananda, I recognized Yogananda's Kriya technique as identical to an ancient Coptic exercise Master Stanley had taught us years earlier called the Cobra Breath. I introduced Clark to Master Stanley and Lee, and Clark and I began a serious study of spirituality. We were both in our late teens by then, and Clark had recently married. I was recovering from a painful breakup with a girlfriend, and we agreed that to do our spiritual work best, we should seek isolation. So Clark and his wife bought a teepee, and I bought one, and we three gave away everything else we own in the world except some clothes and our spiritual books. We bought 100 pounds of wheat, 100 pounds of dried fruits, some basic camping equipment, and got a ride up into Michigan's Upper Peninsula, where an old trapper led us on a 3-day trek back into the Chippewa National Forest to a small lake that isn't on most maps. We spent the summer there, Clark and his wife on one side of the lake, me on the other. 3 days a week, we practiced silence and did meditation and prayer every day for hours. I had a pet tachinid fly, a small insect that looks like a honeybee but is actually a fly. When I'd meditate in the morning on my blanket outside my teepee, he'd come and hover just over my right hand as if he were drawing nourishment from me. Sometimes he'd hover there for as much as 20 minutes. Occasionally, he'd land and walk around with careful steps like an astronaut exploring a distant but friendly planet. I also shared my teepee with a large and furry brown and black wolf spider who came out at night as the sun set and picked the sleeping mosquitoes off the canvas on the west side of my teepee. I watched the play of life and death, predator and prey. Here's an odd synchronicity that Carl Jung would have appreciated. I haven't seen a tachinid fly for years, but as I'm typing these words into a laptop computer on my back porch in Atlanta, one just hovered over my left hand for a few moments and then landed. He's here with me as I'm typing, sitting on my hand. One cold and rainy afternoon, Clark and I were walking through the woods looking for berries and edible plants. We'd gotten pretty skilled at identifying what was safe and what wasn't, and we're filling a bag with leaves and fruits. This must be what our ancestors lived like, Clark observed, hunting and gathering. Except we're vegetarians, so we're just gathering, I said, joking. But to Clark, it wasn't a joke. Seriously, what we call civilization started when humans started farming. But humans like us were around for tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of years before that, fully conscious, awake, aware, thinking and feeling just like us. But they were hunters and gatherers instead of farmers. I said, without agriculture, there'd be no civilization. It was an interesting thought. Remember Miss Hemmer? Clark said. Miss Hemmer had been our 8th grade biology teacher and one of the best teachers I'd ever known in my life. Clark and I had conspired to make her life difficult, but we also loved her and learned more from her each month than from any of our other teachers in a year. And she was a huge fan of Margaret Mead. Clark said, she said that in primitive societies, there isn't suicide, depression, drug addiction, all that stuff. The noble savage, I said, shivering. I'm skeptical and cold. And the Indians who lived here once were probably cold, too. He shrugged and said, this life seems much more natural to me. At least I had to agree with that. A few days later, Clark came running over to my teepee with his Bible, all excited. Look at this, he said, pointing to Genesis 4:2. It says, Cain was a tiller of the ground. The Bible is talking about how the first murderer was also the first farmer. And in the 25th verse, it makes it clear that Abel, the brother who was not the farmer, was the one who loved God the most. So what, I said. It's a classic archetype of the oldest child being the most beloved, but also the one who screws up. It's all over, from Greek mythology to Shakespeare. Don't you see, Clark said? Adam and Eve were gatherers like we are now. They walked around the Garden of Eden and picked up food. But then they tasted of the knowledge of good and evil, of life and death. That's your food supply. You live or die by it. When you live as a gatherer, you live by a whim of nature. If there's no food, you die. When you begin to store up food, you can defy nature and survive a drought. You then have the power to control life, the knowledge of life or death, or good and evil. So the tasting of the apple must have meant that Adam and Eve experimented with agriculture, and in doing so, they defied the God of nature. It's a warning. It's saying that the primitive life of hunting, gathering, and herding was more in accord with nature's way than is agriculture. Clark dove deep into the issue, but I didn't consider it all that important at the time. I couldn't see how when people started farming after the end of the Ice Age, it had been such a bad thing. After all, it brought us modern society and science. Clark, however, was totally certain that agriculture and what he called the organized ones were responsible for the coming death of the earth. The book, The Prophet's Way. Well, you get
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with me is Julio Rivera, editorial director at the Reactionary Times, columnist with Newsmax, right-wing news and politics. ReactionaryTimes.com is the website. You can tweet Julio at, oh, yeah, it's Julio. And Julio, welcome back to the program.
Hey, how are you, Tom?
I'm well. I'm not sure America is, though. We've got Gabriel Winnow wrote this piece for the New York Times about the horrors of elder care. California, Connecticut, Illinois, Kansas, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Wisconsin, all having major scandals about people being treated so badly in these warehouses for elderly people. That was largely done away with by the expansion, by an expansion in the early 1980s, actually, under Reagan, of Medicaid. And so we got that. Then we got this piece Molly Redden in New York writing in the Guardian. GOP health care bill may send pregnant women back to days without coverage. It starts out in 2011. This woman who was, getting married and planning on having a baby, and she found that she couldn't get any health insurance anywhere in the state of Missouri that covered pregnancy without an 18-month waiting period and an additional $100 to $1,000 a month additional payment. And that was done away with by well, in theory, it was done away with by the Pregnancy Discrimination Act of '78. But in 2014, health care plans were sold to individuals that didn't require maternity coverage. And then finally, in the New York Times here, 2 cases of the plague in New Mexico. I mean, wouldn't you think that public health, everybody having access to health, would be a public health issue? Would be a national security issue.
No, I understand what direction it is that you're taking it, but I think that there's and listen, first of all, I want to preface this by saying I am not in favor of this current GOP healthcare bill. I have my own reasons why I don't like it, which are probably different than yours, but I just want to preface it by saying that. But the demagoguing of the Medicaid situation is in full force right now. I mean, it's not a cut necessarily. It's a cut in the rate of growth. It's what Barack Obama or somebody like him might like to call a sequester, where you're slowing the rate of growth, but you're not exactly cutting anything.
But you're not
Medicaid
slowing the
spending
rate of
still
growth
goes
of baby
from
boomers aging into
to 436 billion over a 10-year period.
You're,
so it is still
but
growing.
Julio, you're not slowing the rate of growth of the biggest bulge generation, arguably in American history. Maybe there was a similar one after the Civil War. Of people now aging out. You've got baby boomers who are hitting their 70s right now and going into nursing homes.
Yeah, but they're going to be getting Medicare, not Medicaid. The majority.
Medicaid is what pays for nursing homes, not Medicare. Medicare will not pay for nursing homes.
I understand, but they're not the only people that are on Medicaid. There's going to be money. There's going to be more money. In fact, it grows. If you
64% of all nursing home enrollments right now are paid for by Medicaid.
Okay, I understand that, and they're still getting a 10% bump in spending over a 10-year period.
But they're getting like a 60 or 70% increase in people. I mean, it's like what you're saying to me is don't worry, this car will drive all the way to California. We've got 10 gallons of gas.
To that generation. No, that's absolutely a false number. That's not correct. But the other part of it, too, is that the states are going to decide the way that Medicaid is going to work and what their participation levels are going to be at and all of that.
Yeah, like Mississippi has a lot of room to raise their income taxes to pay for more program. Come on, all the red states are taker states, Julio. Every single one of them is, for every dollar they get, they send to the federal government, they're getting $2 back.
The taker state, the biggest taker state that there is California. I mean, Jesus Christ.
California, for every dollar California sends to Washington, D.C., they get back about 75 cents. California is a maker state, as are all the blue states. The red states are the taker states, and they're the ones who are going to get hit the worst by this because they're the ones who are desperate, for federal funds.
No, they're not. Most of those states have budgets that are either balanced or their debt is nowhere near at the level of a state like California.
Because of federal funds. Because of federal money. Because they're for every dollar they send to Washington, D.C., they're getting more than $1 back. Look it up. I'm not making this stuff up, Julio. This is not rocket science.
Listen, I'll tell you this much, though, because, since I'm a conservative and a Republican and the perception is that, we're all greedy, terrible people. The bottom line is this is America. And America is, by proportion with the rest of the world, a well-to-do country in some ways, not in every way. We obviously have to be able to take care of people. The big concern here, and I think what's lost, is that people always make the emotional argument for for the people that are completely out of it, like the very, very, very.
Well, if you're talking about your father or mother being in a rest home, how is that not emotional?
For the people that do work, the people that comprise the majority mainstream America, those Americans, they just want to have access to affordable health insurance. And the reason that they haven't is because of the heavy-handed, regulatory burden.
No, the reason they haven't is because there's banksters between us and our doctors.
And now by the American Health Care Act, what they need to do is they need to ease that so that we can have those, the interstate sale of insurance. We need things like tort reform. We need expanded and fully tax deductible healthcare savings accounts, things like that. And then the other pieces will fall into place as more people enter.
Julio, this is nonsense. Texas passed tort reform 10 years ago. They said you can't sue for more than $250,000. That's the maximum that your life is worth. It didn't do anything.
Provider is actual, malpractice insurance. If you reform that, it will obviously bring down the cost.
No, they did it in Texas. It didn't do anything for the rates. All it did was screw people who were badly screwed by their doctors.
No, that's a good soundbite, Tom. But
look it up, Julio. Texas has had tort reform for a decade. It's not reduced. I'm
not saying that that's the be-all, end-all, Tom, and that's going to fix the problem.
Well, and health savings accounts aren't going to do anything for anybody who's not wealthy enough to put the money away.
What was that?
Health savings accounts aren't going to do anything for anybody. What's $5,000 in them? First of all, how many people have an extra $5,000 every year to toss into a health savings account? Number one. And number two, when you get cancer and you're looking at a $300,000 bill, how's that health savings account going to help you?
And how about making fully portable ones that families can all contribute into? So if you have a family of 5-6 people and everybody's paying into it, whoever needs it.
Well, that works great if you're a rich Republican. But
making those health care savings accounts fully portable between family members.
So that works marvelous if you're somebody with a $400,000 a year income.
putting money into it.
Or if you're a billionaire, I get it, you know, but I don't see where that is of value to somebody making $50,000 a year.
The average American family over a 2 to 3 year period can put away, you know, somewhere between $5,000 and $12,000. If there's 4 or 5 working people contributing into it, and then God forbid if somebody needs to use it, they have some semblance of a cushion there. I mean, it's not perfect. This is the problem with the people assume the government can come in and make one big sweeping change to something as big as, you know,
like Canada did, like France did, like Germany did, like Sweden did, like Norway did, like Denmark did.
No, that doesn't
There are
work.
35 developed countries in the world, Julio. The Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD countries, there's 36 developed countries in the world. 35 of them have single-payer healthcare programs.
Yeah, I don't want to live in a country where my tax rate is 80% and the suicide rate is high. I don't want to be sitting there in that type of an environment. Americans want to be free. We desire to be free. We desire low taxes, and we desire choices.
So your definition of freedom is not having health insurance. Your definition of freedom is not having health insurance.
No, not having the freedom to purchase the health insurance that you want and not be forced and put on the hook to pay for services like some guy in jail sex change or anything like an abortion that would violate your religious liberty.
But you have no problem paying taxes for, you know, wars that you don't agree with?
No, I don't like war. Listen, first of all, we want to go with the war issue. I believe in peace through strength, but I didn't believe in the Iraq war, if that's the way you want to take it.
I just
think listen, I'm not a neocon nation builder. I believe that we should keep our country
We either do it for everybody or we don't, Julio. I mean, are we a we the people nation? The first 3 words of the Constitution, the first 3 words of the Declaration of Independence, we the people. Are we a nation of, by, and for we the people, to paraphrase Lincoln? Or are we a nation of, by, and for rich people who can afford health savings accounts?
Listen, we should be a country that provides the maximum amount of choice and opportunity for American citizens.
And why don't we do what Canada did?
But unfortunately, listen, this system has gotten too big. And it's gotten too big because of the progressives in government, that they want to sit there and stick their hand.
It's gotten too big because you got a bunch of health insurance CEOs who are ripping us off.
Listen, that's what weakens we the people more than anything else, is these tax and spend progressive policies that your party mostly backs.
Yeah, so you're promoting the freedom to pay $20,000 a month if you have a pre-existing condition. Do I have that right?
Well, listen, if you can't expect an insurance company to just automatically take a hit like that, and you can't.
That's why we shouldn't have insurance companies.
Wait a minute, and I want to make a point too about for-profit health insurance. If you don't have, and listen, there's banksters and profiteering and all those things that you talk about in the health insurance industry. I'm right there with you, Tom. Like literally, I'm sitting shotgun in the car next to you on that one. But the fact is, if you don't have for-profit healthcare, the level of service goes down. You no longer get the best and the brightest.
We're 29th in the world,
and the
Julio.
overall level of healthcare goes down.
We're 29th in the world in healthcare outcomes.
People get crappy healthcare and they come here for healthcare.
We're 29th in the world in healthcare outcomes. We are the most. We spend in the United States spends $8,233 per person on healthcare. Norway, the next most expensive country in the world, spends $5,300. Switzerland spends $5,200.
Do you want your doctor
the UK
to be a
spends
$1,600 guy, or do you want your doctor
All of those
to be
countries have better outcomes than we do.
I don't know. I'd still rather see a doctor in America than any other country.
Because you can make money, right?
No, not because I have nothing to do with making money off of the healthcare industry.
Then why would you rather be a doctor in the United States? My doctor is insanely frustrated by the insurance. She's got to hire 2 people for a 1-doctor practice just to deal with all the paperwork. Whereas in a single-payer system, she can do it herself.
You know what? And that sucks. And I totally agree. There is way too much.
So let's go to a single-payer system. Let's do like Norway does and get our costs from $8,000 a person down to $5,000 a person. Save the country $800 billion a year.
That for every single person. We have over 300 million people in this country. We would not be able to service that many people.
Oh, it would be easier for us, actually. There are 800 million people in Europe, and they're all covered by single-payer health insurance.
Doctors GSAs now? Are you gonna go ahead and do like Hillary Care, where Hillary Care had a provision if it had passed in the 90s, where if a doctor gave services to somebody outside of the scope
Julio,
of a
we're hitting the wall here. I'm sorry. Julio Rivera, editorial director of Reactionary Times. Hang on just a second. Oh, you can tweet him at, oh, yeah, it's Julio. Thank you, Julio.
Thank you, Tom.
We'll be back. Welcome back. Claudia in Port Angeles, Washington. Hey, Claudia. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to talk about the number 666 and the beast and all that.
Yeah, I had that wrong for a little bit. I'm sorry. It was 777. But yeah.
So, yeah, actually the number is 666, and it coincides with the Hebrew alphabet that the people of that generation understood. Mm-hmm. And what it meant was it represented Caesar Nero, who was the beast. Yeah. And it was warning the people of that generation about the destruction of the temple in 70 A.D. And it wasn't until dispensational came into our country in the 1700s that, that theory sort of took to, I call it newspaper eschatology,
mm-hmm.
The paper in one hand and the Bible in the other. So,
but the temple was destroyed in 78 A.D., and Revelation was written somewhere between 100 and 150 A.D., so was he looking backwards?
No, he was just warning the people of his generation of the takeover of the people. Like, in other words, warning them to flee if they could.
Yeah, or maybe Revelation was written earlier, and I don't have it right.
Well, a lot of people have the idea that it's written for our generation. I mean, if he was writing it for us, then the people reading it at the time would have no idea what he was even talking about. They'd be saying, what is he saying?
Yeah, what are these flying things? And
yeah, the number isn't 666. It's actually 666. So,
okay.
But anyway, I hear that a lot, and it kind of bugs me.
Okay. Well, Claudia, thank you for...
That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks for the clarification. It's great to hear from you. Denise in Calumet, Michigan. Hey, Denise. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Hi, Tom. Good to talk to you again. I really believe that this distraction with Trump is not going to go anywhere with the 25th Amendment, because the Republicans in power, even though they pretend on TV that they're a little bit embarrassed to save face, they are giving the Koch brothers their dream that they've had for decades now. Right. They're dismantling everything. They're taking away regulations. This is just, they don't care that Trump is crazy. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're in trouble because the majority of the people don't want this, and they are in minority, but they have the control, and the gerrymandering is not going to stop, and we have got to just keep fighting. But the Republicans in power are just as bad as Trump. They're just letting him get away with it.
I would say, I would even go beyond that. I would say the Republicans in power are actually using the distractions that Trump is producing to do more of their evil work, essentially.
That's exactly, I think, what I was trying to say. I just couldn't put it into words.
Yeah, outside the light of the glare of publicity, because the glare of publicity has focused on Donald Trump talking about bleeding women and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In my opinion, Trump stands for traitor, racist, unhinged, misogynistic Putin puppet,
okay.
or pig, whatever day you're on.
TRUMP. There you go. What's the best acronym for Trump? That's a pretty good one, Denise.
Yep. My husband came up with that one.
Yeah, that's definitely a good one. Denise, thanks for watching Free Speech TV, and thanks for the call. It's great to hear from you. We'll be back. It's coming up on 23 minutes past.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them
in standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day,
every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Chris in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Hey, Chris, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Can you hear me all right?
Just fine, yeah. What's up, Chris?
I went with a group of folks with disabilities yesterday to a meeting with Senator Ron Johnson. And I think if anybody that's hoping for Ron Johnson to slow this bill down, they're going to have another thing coming.
Really? What happened?
He wants to. I have never seen a politician speak with such utter contempt about folks with disabilities. He talked about those disabled types of disabled people, and talked about able-bodied people with children, without children, misusing the social safety net.
Oh, jeez. So Ron Johnson is one of these cold-hearted, miserly, whatever.
Yes, but he told us all that he didn't write the bill, but we all know that he did.
Yeah. And he said this to your face, Chris. Huh?
Well, he said it over the phone.
Oh, okay. So it was a telephone meeting.
Yeah, but it was not a town hall. It was a private meeting, but I mean, just utter contempt. I don't think that he could. I don't think that he would have the guts to say something like that to some people's face, but I've been wrong before.
Yeah. Well, hopefully somebody recorded it and we can hear what was said. Okay, Chris, thanks for the heads up on Ron Johnson. I appreciate it. And thanks for participating in that call and reporting back to us. It's great to hear from you. Thank you, Chris. Mark in Salem, Oregon, listening on X-Ray FM. Hey, Mark, we got a minute to the break. What's up?
Okay, real quick, comment and then a question. On the 25th Amendment, even should they do it, if he challenges it, it takes 2/3 vote of each chamber.
That's right.
To complete it.
That's
so
right.
I think that's actually a higher standard than impeachment/conviction.
Probably, yeah.
And then on the travel ban, he spent 150-plus days trying to implement a 90 to 120-day ban so he could study the immigration issue.
Right.
Why hasn't he studied it already? What's going on?
Right. It's all this is, and we're seeing, example after example of this, is Donald Trump checking the boxes, and the Republican Party for that matter, checking the boxes on his, so-called campaign promises. He's ignoring the campaign promises that he made, like, ending NAFTA. He's ignoring the campaign promises he made, like protecting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. He's ignoring, the things that a lot of people voted for him for, frankly, bring our jobs back home. He's ignoring all of that. The carrier stuff, they're laying people off. It's nuts. Mark, thanks for the call.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of your calls, my thoughts, and more of the news of the day right after this. Hey, it's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, and today we're reading from Robert Draper's book, When the Tea Party Came to Town. And it was actually, the original title of this book when it first came out was called Do Not Ask What Good We Do. And this is the only book that tells the story of how the Republicans got together the night that Barack Obama was being inaugurated and decided that for the next 4 or 8 years, they were going to do everything they could to destroy our first black president's presidency. And so I'm reading from the prologue, and he's talking about how Frank Luntz had organized that dinner that I was just mentioning. He was very happy about that. The dinner tables were set in a square. This was at the Caucus Room restaurant in a private dining room. It was a little restaurant down at the corner of 9th and D Street. The dinner tables were set in a square at Luntz's request so that everyone could see each other and talk freely. He asked that Gingrich speak first. Gingrich was happy to oblige. And, you know, it goes on through this. Pete Huckstra said, so we're in the depths. And then we get right into it. They would take back that this was their plan. You know, what their party had done from 94 to 2000, what the Democrats had done from 2006 and 2008, the Republicans would want to do again. They would take back the House in November 2010. Then they would use the House as the Republicans' spear point to mortally wound President Obama in 2011. They would do this and retake the House and the Senate in 2012. They would do all this, but only if the American voter blessed them to do so. It made no sense they all agreed to attack Obama personally. He was too popular. Got to be about ideas, said Eric Cantor. Democrats now controlled everything and were already with a monstrously priced economic stimulus package showing their true colors. Given time, they'd screw things up, as the GOP had. But, said Paul Ryan, everyone's got to stick together. Ryan, a 38-year-old Wisconsin congressman and numbers fetishist, whose shiny earnestness recalled an Ozzie and Harriet America. Ryan hated squabbling among conservatives, the paleos versus the neos, the socials against the moderates, and on for as long as he'd been on the Hill, which was most all of his adult life. Ryan had long sought to be the Republican Party's glue, pleading for adherence to principles and data. At times, he looked like the underfed, hollow-eyed child of alcoholic parents. Well, the only way we'll succeed is if we're united, Ryan told the others. If we tear ourselves apart, we're finished. But, he added, he liked what he was hearing now. Everyone at the table sounded like a genuine conservative. It was a place to start. If you act like you're the minority, you're going to stay in the minority, said Kevin McCarthy. We got to challenge them on every single bill and challenge them on every single campaign. That's Kevin McCarthy. Luntz viewed McCarthy as one of the Republican Party's emerging stars, an easygoing, unthreatening guy who understood that language and appearance mattered as much as substance. Nonetheless, the poller and media guru interjected a cautionary note. One of the worst political performances I've ever seen, he said, was when the Democrats took over the House in 2007 and Nancy Pelosi shut out the Republicans and everyone whined about it. If any of you behave that way, I'll go on TV and hold you accountable. Luntz tended to get carried away, but everyone knew he had a point. Senator John Kyle began to focus on immediate tactics. He pointed out that Tim Geithner, Obama's nominee to be Secretary of the Treasury, had failed to pay his Social Security and Medicare taxes during his 3-year employment at the International Monetary Fund. Kyle sat on the Senate Finance Committee, which would be conducting Geithner's confirmation hearings the next morning. The Arizona senator intended to go after the nominee. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the approach I should take, he said to the others. There was a pattern here, Gingrich pointed out. Charlie Rangel, the new House Ways and Means Committee chairman, hadn't paid taxes on his rental property income in more than 2 decades. Randall and Geithner would be wielding more power over how taxpayer dollars would be spent than anyone else in America. And then there's the web, chimed in McCarthy. There are freshmen who accept campaign money from Rangel. They're caught in the web. McCarthy suggested that they waste no time smacking down the New Democrats for the tax ads. The dinner lasted nearly 4 hours. They parted company almost giddily. The Republicans had finally agreed on a way forward. Go after Geithner, and indeed Kyle did the next day. Would you answer my question rather than dancing around it, please? Show united and unyielding opposition to the president's policies. 8 days later, Minority Whip Cantor would hold the House Republicans to a unanimous no against Obama's economic stimulus plan. Begin attacking vulnerable Democrats on the airwaves. The first Democratic National Republican Congressional Committee attacks would run in fewer than 2 months. Win the spear point of the House in 2010. Jab Obama relentlessly in 2011. Win the White House and the Senate in 2012. You will remember this day, Newt Gingrich proclaimed to the others as they said goodbye. You'll remember this as the day the seeds of 2012 were sown. Well, not so much, but I'd say that this is when the seeds of 2016 were sown.
Forgotten, or at least not discussed that night in the caucus room, was what had been sown in America by January 20th, 2009. That was the day the meeting happened, the day that President Obama was sworn into office. On that evening, while the ruling party celebrated in tuxedos and the minority party retrenched over steaks and red wine, U.S. unemployment rate had climbed to 7.6%, the highest such indicator of national misery in 18 years. Things could get much worse. Joblessness in America would exceed 8% the following month. By May 2009, the number would climb to 9.4%, and by October to 10.2%. And it goes on. It's a great book. Robert Draper, When the Tea Party Came to Town. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I'm reading the Twitter feed of Jessica Lawyer. I just retweeted a bunch of her tweets. It's at Jessica Lawyer, the number 2. And she and a bunch of women dressed as from The Handmaid's Tale showed up at Cory Gardner's office yesterday, the Republican senator from Colorado, to object to the health care bill. He responded by inviting them to sit in it was 90 degrees, to sit in a room that was not air conditioned for an hour and a half, and they're all sweating and having a terrible time. I guess that is The Handmaid's Tale, isn't it? That's pretty bizarre. So anyhow, David in Old Bridge, New Jersey. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Yes, Tom. I don't know where to start, but I wanted to say I'm from the Caribbean, and I get friends and relatives in Europe, in France, in Canada, in England especially.
Mm-hmm.
There's no such thing as a wait or being online for medical care. These people tell me all the time, I don't envy you guys in the United States. I don't want your life. We love what we have in Europe. But anyway, this is not healthcare. Healthcare is prevention. For example, I had 4 uncles, 3 aunties. I was in the Virgin Islands in St. Croix just last year to bury my last auntie at 104. She was a nurse. Excuse my accent. She was a nurse in Virginia for years. She practiced nursing in the Caribbean before under the British system. So we used to be British and French. My 3 uncles, died of cigarette cancer. My dad died he was 88. He had a fall. He hit his head on the balcony, and he got a stroke. My 2 other aunties, who were 99 and 101. These people, diet, exercise. But in this bill, it's all about insurance. It has nothing to do with healthcare.
Yeah.
In the way I feel, healthcare is help people with heroin, teach these kids not to eat crap to get obese, help old people as best as you can.
Yeah, I completely agree.
About how much you pay.
Yeah.
Republicans say, oh, they're coming over from Canada to get health care. No, these people come over to get cosmetic care.
Yeah.
They want to go to Hollywood, fix their lip, their butt.
You're right. We've got some of the best plastic surgery in the world.
Of course we do.
Yeah.
But why we all get... I go to the hospital and for MRI, and I see all the medical instruments. It's Hitachi, Siemens from Germany, Japanese. I saw GE, but,
Yeah.
Don't tell me we have the best in the world. We don't.
Yeah. Yeah, well said, David. Very, very well said. Thank you for the call, and thank you for your comments. And let me just, by the way, just take a moment here, and then we'll get back to the calls. I predicted yesterday that Mitch McConnell would use his $181 billion that the CBO said, okay, you've got this amount left over before your legislation starts, being budget deficit neutral, or stops being budget deficit neutral. And so McConnell can, say to Shelley Moore Capito, oh, you want money for opioid treatment in West Virginia? Fine, here's $10 billion. Rob Portman, you want opioid treatment? Here's $20 billion. He can pass out up to $180 billion. That's a mind-boggling amount of money. And Mitch McConnell, mark my words, is betting right now and is negotiating right now with his Republican senators that he can buy their votes for the tax cuts for the billionaires that made it possible for Mitch McConnell to be the Senate Majority Leader and to have a Republican majority in the House and Senate. Because those billionaires, they want a return on their investment. They want their taxes cut. Loretta in Denver. Hey, Loretta, what's up?
I just had neck surgery and got out of a rehab facility here in Aurora and Denver. And when in my small circle of people that I associated in the 2 weeks that I was there, there were 2 people from Texas, one from Kansas, and one from Oklahoma. And they moved in with family relatives so they could get our state's Medicaid expansion because those states did not take the Medicaid expansion.
Really?
Yes. One lady from Texas had been caught in a revolving door, and what she had broken ribs and some other injuries, and she went to a doctor and they wouldn't treat her. So her son, who lives here, is an oil worker, drove down, picked her up in Texas, drove her all the way to Colorado, put her on Medicaid, and got her care. And those people are doing that to us full-fledged and then standing there, and they'll be the only ones in this whole new program that come out on top because our Medicaid will go through the roof. Colorado taxpayers are already paying much more for our neighbors than what they've ever taken care of us.
So
and
there
we've
are
done
people
that continually throughout history, but this is ridiculous.
So your experience being in this rehab facility and the post-surgery was that it was filled with people from red states who fled those red states to come to Colorado for a brief period of time, long enough to establish residency and become eligible for Medicaid expansion so that they could then get medical treatment.
They didn't even establish residency. They moved in with a relative
who already had residency. So so wow. So we've got internal refugees in the United States, refugees from Republican healthcare policies.
Yes.
That is mind-boggling. Loretta, I encourage you to write that up. That's the sort of story, if you can document your story.
I called everybody I can call in the state to tell them because I am furious about it. It's not that I don't mind helping other people out.
Yeah.
It's that they are usurping our ability to take care of our own.
Well, this is the red states. They're the taker states. They're moochers, you know. It's...
Yeah, and that's the thing that's also wrong with states' rights is because you have a few people at the top that don't like so-and-so and so-and-so, and they all get pushed out, and the rest get everything. And that's what's wrong with states' rights, too.
Yeah.
Because sooner or later, you can't go home because you can't pay the toll road fees.
Yeah.
It's just dumb.
Yeah, this is crazy. Loretta, thank you for sharing that that insight with us. That's pretty astonishing. And like I said, if you were to write that up, I would bet, you know, Common Dreams, Alternet, truthout.org, there's a whole bunch of websites that would probably enthusiastically print it, and I have a feeling it would go viral. Please let me encourage you, if you have any writing skills at all or have a friend who does, to get that thing out there. And you can also you know, tell the story on our daily blog over at thomhartmann.com. But Loretta, good luck. Thank you for sharing that story with us. I really appreciate it. Cheryl in Wilsonville, Oregon. Hey, Cheryl. Thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's up?
Well, my point is specifically about the Affordable Care Act and the point that everybody is making that it is a Democratic bill. It's from the Democratic Party.
Right.
It is not.
No, it was...
The content of the bill is bipartisan. There are many, many amendments to the bill that are Republican amendments.
Right, including the one that says that every member of Congress has to use Obamacare.
Okay.
Yep.
The next point I want to make on that is that the vote for it was bipartisan. And let me tell you how this is. It's not that the Republicans voted for it. They did not. Democrats voted for it, but it would not have passed had not the independents voted with them.
That's Bernie and Angus King.
That's
Bernie Sanders and Angus King are the two independents in the Senate.
And
oh, you're talking about back in the day. That's right. I'm sorry. Yeah, back when it was passed.
And
yeah.
Bernie Sanders were
Right,
the
Joe Lieberman.
independents at that time.
Yeah.
They had a Republican who became Democratic.
Right.
Became a member of the Democrats and voted for it. Right. But according to Republicans, if one Democrat votes for a Republican bill, the bill is bipartisan.
Right.
Therefore, the Affordable Care Act is a bipartisan bill.
Okay. All right. I like your logic. I like your logic, Cheryl. Thank you very much for the call, and thank you for laying that out. And you're right. And by the way, Joe Lieberman, this is, to his eternal discredit. Joe Lieberman's vote was conditional on there not being a single-payer option in the health insurance in Obamacare. No single-payer, or excuse me, no public option, and he would vote for it. It was Joe Lieberman who killed the public option. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls. We're going to check in with Talk Media News, too. And welcome back. Let's see here. Where's a YouTube call? Bruce in Cotati, California. Am I saying that right, Bruce? Watching Free Speech TV?
Well, it's Cotati and Pembroke. We live like the chicken capital of the world, they call it.
Okay. So what's up?
Well, I was wondering, if it's so easy with this interstate cross-check thing, I never even heard of that till this happened this year. Why can't the Democrats go and start knocking Republicans off the voting rolls the same way? I mean, it seems like anybody can go in and rummage around and throw people off willy-nilly. It doesn't make any sense to have that loose of a system.
Yeah.
How does this happen?
Well, the way the cross-check works, some Republicans do get caught up in cross-check, but they're the minority. The way that they did it is minority populations tend to disproportionately have a higher concentration of a smaller number of names. So if you look at the overall, white population in the United States, since they came from all over Europe by and large, and Russia and other places like that, the Caucasus and whatnot, you've got all these, hundreds of different ethnic names and variations on those ethnic names and Anglicizations of those ethnic names. And so this is a wide variety of names for white people in this country. Black people in this country, a much smaller cohort of names. There's a couple of dozen names that are very, very common in the black community. In the Korean American community, which was a large, Koreatown was in John Ossoff's district in Georgia's 6th. In the Korean American community, the name Kim is just ubiquitous. There's a half a dozen names that are almost everybody's last name. Chinese American communities, same thing. There's a couple of dozen names that are pretty much ubiquitous. In Hispanic communities, there's 10 or 12 names that represent pretty much not everybody, but a large chunk of the Hispanic community. And so when you do comparisons of, looking for Jose Hernandez in Georgia, and is there a Jose Hernandez in Colorado? Yep, there is. Must be the same guy, flying back and forth and voting in both states. Let's take him off both voter rolls. That's a lot easier than looking for John Mankiewicz,
Yeah. Well, there's middle initials and there's other ways.
Well, with cross-check, they ignore the middle initials, which is how they get so many people. That's how they knocked 7.2 million people off the voting rolls. They ignore the middle initials. They ignore the Social Security number. This is Mark Pocan's legislation that he announced on the program yesterday, was that if you are going to, at the state level, if you're going to be purging people off the voting rolls, you must demonstrate that the person who you are purging them against, the Jose Hernandez in Florida, is actually also the Jose Hernandez in Colorado. You've got to prove that. Right. You've got to prove that with the last 4 digits of the social, the date of birth, the middle name, and any title, junior, senior, that kind of thing.
Right.
Because they were nailing a lot of juniors and seniors.
Yeah.
Pardon?
We have numbers. We have Social Security numbers. There's a lot of other identification that we are forced to use.
Right, but interstate cross-check ignores all those. Just like Katherine Harris did in Florida in 2000 when she threw 60 to 90,000 African Americans off the voting rolls by doing a cross-check against the Texas felon registry, which is overwhelmingly black. And so there were a lot of people who had the same names, again, common names in the black community, in the African American community. There were people who had the same first and last name in Texas who were felons, as there were just normal people in Florida who had never done anything wrong but were registered voters. And she knocked them off the rolls, and that's what got George Bush within 500 votes of stealing the election. Bruce, I got to run. Thanks for the call. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do, and goatsfortheoldgoat.com. And Victoria Jones is on the line with us. Hey, Victoria.
Hey, Tom.
Nice to see your smiling face. So what's going on in the world today?
So Republicans in the Senate are scrambling to try and get something done on their Obamacare repeal before they head off for the July 4th recess, which they'd like to leave for later this afternoon.
My prediction was that since Mitch McConnell has $181 billion to play with before this legislation hits the point where it can't be used for reconciliation, where it goes negative on the budget deficit, he's going to pass that money out to intransigent Republicans. Shelley Moore Capito is going to get $20 billion for opiate treatment in West Virginia. Rob Portman, same thing in Ohio, that kind of thing. Is my prediction coming true, or was I just off?
No, you're partially right. They are, it looks like, going to put $49 billion towards opioid treatment nationwide, but they're also looking at possibly getting rid of one of their Obamacare repeal bill's tax cuts. The net investment tax, which imposes a 3.8% charge on some investments by people who make more than $250,000 a year. Apparently, Mitch McConnell is thinking of keeping that and then using the money to help more low-income people pay for insurance. So they're thinking of doing that. And then there's another one they're thinking of keeping, which is a Medicare tax increase from Obamacare that they would initially have cut. So that would give them more than $2 billion more to invest in health care. So they're thinking of doing that. They think that might help. Yeah. So that's the latest scrambling they've got. Another Republican governor came out against their bill today. That's Chris Sununu from New Hampshire.
Wow.
So there's a few Republican bills now that are against it. You've got John Kasich, you've got Brian Sandoval of Nevada, and Arizona Governor Doug Ducey, and Sununu. There may be others.
So do you think that Mitch is going to try and pull a vote tomorrow?
I don't think so. I don't know whether they're actually leaving tonight or whether he might try to get them to say, no, he wants to get another CBO score first, is my understanding.
Which takes, what, about 3 days?
Yeah, and I don't know whether the CBO plans to work over July the 4th.
Right, but, well, they're working that week because the federal holiday is only Tuesday.
Yeah.
So, and the CBO people are just generic federal employees, so they will work Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah. But he does want to get another CBO score because he wants better numbers.
Yeah. Well, he'll get them if he does that. But still, if we go from throwing 22 million people off health care down to 8 million people off health care, that's supposed to be good?
I think they might consider that is adequate.
Huh. Okay. All right.
They might.
How big a deal, if I may, how big a deal is Donald Trump's tweet about Mika Brzezinski this morning? It seems to me pretty damn shocking.
It is pretty damn shocking, and that's my next story. It is pretty damn shocking, but one of the questions that's being asked is, was this just an outburst or was it strategic?
Well, that was what I was asking. Is he trying to distract people's attention from everything that's going on with the healthcare stuff?
Is he trying to do that, or was it an outburst?
Right. Or both.
Or both. It could be both. And for those who may have missed it, it was a tweet in two parts. It was two parts because it was longer than 140 characters. But he heard poorly rated At Morning Joe speaks badly of me. Don't watch anymore. Then he went on to hit Mika Brzezinski. How come low IQ crazy Mika, along with Psycho Joe, came to Mar-a-Lago 3 nights in a row around New Year's Eve and insisted on joining me? She was bleeding badly from a facelift. I said no.
Right. Why? If she was bleeding badly, why didn't he call an ambulance?
I don't know. And anyway, it seems that his depiction of how that went down at Mar-a-Lago may not be quite accurate either. Republican, obviously, Democrats are condemning it. Many Republicans are condemning this quite strongly.
Yeah, I saw Ben Sass and Lindsey Graham both tweeted, wait a minute, this isn't worthy of the president, or words to that effect.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Melania, Trump's spokeswoman, is saying, well, you know, I said before, if the president's hit, he will punch back 10 times harder. And remember that Melania Trump was going to take on cyberbullying as one of her signature issues. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, White House spokeswoman, was on Fox News, and she was saying that this is a president who fights fire with fire. She says there's been outrageous attacks, personal ones, and he'll certainly not allowed to be bullied by liberal media or liberal elites in Hollywood or anywhere else. She says she's personally been attacked on Morning Joe that matters nothing to do with her beliefs. She's seen far worse things. So she says, I'm sure people will be going back through Morning Joe to see if she has actually been attacked worse than. Yeah. So who knows? But yeah, it is pretty shocking that why does he attack women? He always attacks Mika much worse than he attacks Joe.
Right.
Much worse.
Right. And he seems to have an obsession with women and blood.
Women and blood. Good-looking blonde women on television and blood.
Yes.
And
then we saw that good-looking blonde reporter from Ireland from RTI News, and he was hitting on her essentially in front of the whole world. I mean, that was so bizarre.
She had a nice smile. It was very, very awkward position she was in.
Oh, and she's from everything I've read about this woman, she is a 5-star reporter. I mean, she's the real deal. And she's being treated like a bimbo. I mean, that's just, it's awful.
It's an impossible position to be in when a president says something like, what are you supposed to do? Slap him down? You cannot do that.
Yeah.
You cannot do that.
So what else is going on in the world?
German Chancellor Angela Merkel says that next week's global summit in Hamburg is going to focus on pressing on with the Paris Climate Accord, despite President Trump's move to pull the U.S. out of the deal. And she said that since the U.S. announced it's going to exit, we cannot expect any easy talks. We can't and we won't wait until the last person on Earth is convinced of the scientific evidence for climate change, she said. She did not mention who she was talking about. Yeah. And she said resistance from climate change skeptics will not convince the members of the pact to revise the agreement, calling it irreversible. So she said that the dissent is obvious, and that she said that the talks were going to be difficult.
Yeah, remarkable. So 30 seconds to go here, Victoria. One more.
House Appropriations Committee, in a surprise move by Representative Barbara Lee, the anti-war member, adopted an amendment that would force Congress to vote on a new authorization for the battle against ISIS. This
really?
Is the authorization for the use of military force. Yes.
Wow.
Yes,
so well, that's the kind of, the Justin Amish's, or Amish, however you say his last name, Amash, I guess. The kind of libertarian Republicans are on board with that, are they not?
Yes, but other Republicans said that they were convinced by her argument.
Wow. Wow. Well, she's a brilliant legislator and a true champion, of peace and of the people. Victoria Jones with Talk Media News. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
Great having you with us. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
And welcome to the Thom Hartmann Book Club, Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America by Michael Eric Dyson, who was a guest on our program a while back. This is from page 86. One of the great privileges of whiteness is not to see color, not to see race, and not to pay a price for ignoring it, except, of course, when you're called on it. But even then, the price pales quite literally in comparison to the high price black folk pay for being black. We pay a price, too, for not even being able to derive recognition and financial reward for the styles that make the world want to be black so bad that they don't mind looking like us as long as they never, ever have to be us. If the appropriators can freely rip off our culture with no consequences, those who revise racial history, the fourth stage of white racial grief, are even less accountable for their deeds. The way of the racial revisionist when it comes to black life and history is simply to rewrite it. Their motto is, it didn't happen that way. There's a flood of writing that tells us that the Civil War wasn't really about slavery, but about an effort to defend states' rights. But, my friend, you've got to put yourself in our place and see the absurdity of such a claim. Defend the rights of states to do what? To enslave blacks. But even here, the irresistible logic of whiteness, that is, irresistible to whites themselves, and to all of us who are subjected to white whim, springs into full action. White American history is so powerful that even when it loses, it wins, at least in skirmishes within whiteness itself. From the right wing, there is the belief that the Civil War was fought over the ability of individual states to beat back a federal government out to impose its will. From the left wing, there's the belief that the Civil War was a conflict between the planter class and the proletariat. In each case, race as the main reason for the war is skillfully rewritten, or really written out. Slavery is rewritten too. Some white Christian apologists contend that black folk needed slavery to save their souls or to rescue their cultures. A contemporary twist on this argument radiates in thinkers like Dinesh D'Souza, who claims that American blacks brought here through slavery are now doing far better than their African kin. Some white critics argue that since blacks sold other blacks into slavery, bondage was a black man's problem, not a white man's burden. But revisionists would much rather describe the dehumanization of black folk as little more than a commercial transaction. It's another way of washing their hands of racial responsibility. The effort to rewrite history surfaces in how Malcolm X is treated in the mainstream. It hardly seems likely that the culture he fought with all his heart could be depended on to grasp his true meaning. Malcolm is often read as an apostle of violence, as a frightful figure consumed by destructive rage. Yet the truth is far more complex, and Malcolm was far more complicated. But isn't the autobiography of Malcolm X so enduringly appealing because it shows Malcolm giving up hatred as a means to racial justice? Now, Malcolm X believed in the liberation of black folk from the mental and psychological chains of white supremacy. He was not committed to nonviolence as a way of life or as a method of social strategy. He believed that such a commitment prevents the full realization of black emancipation. Yet he was not personally violent. As Ossie Davis says in his eulogy, responding to the claim that Malcolm preached hate and was a fanatic and a racist, quote, "Did you even talk to Brother Malcolm? Was he ever himself associated with violence or any public disturbance?" End quote. The rage that flowed in Malcolm's veins was the rage against a force of whiteness that aimed to wash its black kin from the face of the earth. The urge to rewrite black history occasionally gives way to the final stage of white racial grief, which is simply, when it comes to race, dilute it. That is to argue that black stuff doesn't just plague black folk. To summarize, bad stuff happens to everyone. This argument surfaced in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and that storm certainly hit black folk, but it hit white folk too. This is the sordid version of reverse American exceptionalism. It is the same Me Too impulse that flares in the bitter battle against affirmative action. Beloved, I can't help but notice that affirmative action is the bee in so many of your bonnets. You look around in your classrooms and you think every black person is there because they got an unfair shake from the system. You look at your job and you think that your black coworker got an unjust nod of approval from the powers that be. You never stop to think how the history of whiteness in America is one long scroll of affirmative action. You never stop to think that Babe Ruth never had to play the greatest players of his generation, just the greatest white players. You never stop to think that most of our presidents never rose to the top because they bested the competition, only just the white competition. White privilege is a self-selecting tool that keeps you from having to compete with the best. The history of white folk gaining access to Harvard, Princeton, or Yale is the history of white folk deciding ahead of the game that you are superior. You argue that slots in school should be reserved for your kin because, after all, they are smarter, more disciplined, better suited, and more deserving than inferior blacks. That's like concluding that the Cleveland Cavaliers can't possibly win the NBA championship because they're down 3-1 to the Golden State Warriors. Throw in the towel and call it a series. But they must play the series to determine the winner. Whiteness is having all the advantages on your side. The referee's blowing the whistle for you. The arena packed with only your fans. In fact, whiteness means you never even have to play the game at all, at least not in head-to-head matchups with the talent and skill of black folks. Here's We Cannot Stop by Michael Eric Dyson.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. There's an absolutely astonishing article in the New York Times back on June 23rd. That was 6 days ago. It took us a few days to chop up the video and share this with you. This is all New York Times video. Bruce Jessen and James Mitchell were two psychologists who were hired by the Bush administration to come up with an interrogation program that would get more information out of suspected terrorists. And, they viewed it that way. The rest of us viewed it as torture. In fact, one of the people under their care that they had prescribed died of hypothermia, apparently. Others were ultimately released without charges. But I just wanted to share some of the pieces of this that the New York Times shared with all of us. The first is the long-lasting effects of the torture with some recounts by plaintiffs, by victims. Here is the clip.
Do you think that the enhanced interrogation techniques could result in long-term harm?
No.
Why is that?
It never did.
I don't know that for a fact. It's one of those things that you can establish. If they're out there and that happened, then, show me the data.
I think none of the men that I was involved with while I was involved with them experienced anything that would have led to that. I'm very convinced of that.
Have you suffered any psychological injuries as a result of your captivity in Cobalt?
Of course.
What are they?
ما هم nightmares.
Can you tell me about these nightmares?
الكوابيس تأتيني في
It comes to me during my sleep, and as if I'm still imprisoned in that horrible place, and still shackled.
In addition to recurring nightmares, Mr. Bensoud describes feelings of anxiety, fear, and worry. Salim also describes ongoing effects. When asked about his feelings of isolation, he responds,
I don't feel like being with people. I like being by myself, and I don't like walking around to see people. I feel like I'm so weak and I can't do anything.
So this is pretty extraordinary, and the stories. Nate, let's go to clip number 3. This is the description of the torture methods. These are the torture architects, laying this out, and interspersed with detainee testimony. Again, well, actually, let's. I'm not going to do any more of the clips. I'm concerned that we're using too much of the New York Times' content here. But let me just tell you the story here. This from the New York Times, and I encourage you to go to the New York Times website and find this article. It's called "The Torturers Speak" by the editorial board. And they write, the men, Bruce Jessen and James Mitchell, strike a professional pose. Dressed in suits and ties, speaking matter-of-factly, they describe the barbaric acts they and others inflicted on the captives, who were swept up indiscriminately and then waterboarded, slammed into walls, locked into coffins, and more. When pushed to confront the horror and uselessness of what they had done, writes the editorial board of the New York Times about Jessen and Mitchell, the psychologists fell back on one of the oldest justifications of wartime. We were soldiers doing what we were instructed to do, Dr. Jessen said. Perhaps, writes the New York Times editorial board, but they were also soldiers whose contracting business was paid more than $81 million to torture people. This, George W. Bush, this sociopath, who lied us into the war in Iraq and who used 9/11 as an opportunity to attack the second poorest country in the world, even after they offered to arrest bin Laden and hand him over. Just because he wanted a war, just because in '99 he had told his biographer, Mickey Herskowitz, George W. Bush told the guy who was writing his autobiography, a charge to keep, the book that they released just before the election so that George W. Bush could be a great author. The guy who was writing the book has George W., hours and hours of tapes of George W. Bush. And this was before he had even announced that he was running for president. George W. Bush is saying, if I become president, I'm going to have a war. And I'm going to go to war with Iraq. My daddy blew that opportunity. I'm paraphrasing here. We've got the clip of Cindy Sheehan, but I think it'll probably take longer to dig it out and play it than it's worth. I can just do this from memory. Basically, George W. Bush said that his daddy, by only having a 100-hour war, a very short war, in pushing Saddam's guys out of Kuwait, he blew it because he didn't have a war going on when the election happened. And if you got a war going on when an election is happening, then you've got a lot more power, you've got a lot more authority, and people tend to rally around you. And George W. Bush knew this, so he created this war. And the result of this is that the torturers, now they're being sued in Spokane, Washington. The trial starts September 5th by some of their victims. But this is a national disgrace. This is a national horror. This is something that we all should be paying attention to. And I think it's great that the authorization for military force, that this Republican-controlled House committee just moved to, in fact, this is Jennifer Schlattes writes, a room full of wows after House Appropriations Committee Republicans adopted AUMF, the authorization for use of military force, repeal by Barbara Lee. It's incredible. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
A Republican House is moving to strip Trump of the authority to continue wars in the Middle East. We'll see where it goes. I mean, this is just at the very, very beginning. welcome back. Carol, watching us on YouTube in Morning View, Kentucky. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind today?
Well, Tom, I've listened to you for years and years. I now get your podcast, but I happen to be off today. And actually, I'm from Ann Arbor, so I share a lot of things with you.
Oh, great. Yeah, Louise and I used to live there.
Oh, did you? I'm about 5 years older than you. And I also lived in Florida during the Gore fiasco, so that was when I really started paying attention to things, but I've listened to you forever. I work in a financial aspect, and I talk to people every day and about their situations, and you cannot believe the number of people, young people, but all the way up to retirement, that have student loans that are killing them, and the same thing with medical bills that have devastated them. And I don't think we're talking enough about, yes, you can die from this, but you can also be bankrupt and left without anything. We're not covering the aspect of literally ripping the rug out from underneath people and making them destitute.
Yeah, before the ACA, before Obamacare, we were seeing around 1.3 million annual bankruptcies attributable to medical expenses. That number is now down to around 500,000, but that's still a mind-boggling number.
But it's going to go back up because if they start messing with this, there's going to be more people suffering financial loss. They're going to be a heartbeat away because they'll end up with insurance policies. And having been insured in Florida, I'm well aware of the mess that insurance companies can do with the pools that they have and everything else, and people don't realize what they're signing up for.
Yeah, you sign a 20-page contract, and it's got all these gotchas and wherefores and how-sos, and you don't realize that you don't actually have coverage for the surgeon in the hospital if you have to have surgery until you show up at the hospital.
Yeah, and I also found myself between jobs in Florida, and in that state, that meant that I could have a broken back that was like 10 years earlier that I'd never seen a doctor for after I was released to work as a pre-existing condition. And fortunately, when I came to Kentucky, I was actually able to get insurance that covered that. It was like $50 less a month. But in Florida, I paid more and had it excluded. So how they can address those kinds of things without getting into what different states offer and offering across state lines is beyond me. I think we're buying a bag of poop if we go along with what we're being told.
Yes, a flaming bag of poop. To go back to the old, elementary school prank. Yeah, I agree, Carol. When you went to Kentucky, was that because of the Affordable Care Act? Because Kentucky had expanded Medicaid?
No, actually, I am fortunate because I am still covered by an employer, and I am on Medicare, and I probably have the best insurance that most people can have. Mm-hmm. But I do know people that I work with who have had, I actually had a shoulder replacement in 2013, and what one didn't cover, the other did, so it was only like about $500 out of pocket. Yeah. But I know people who've had replacements of knees and shoulders and stuff that work at the same company I do who have had enormous bills.
Yeah, yeah, it's hit or miss here in the United States, which is what's so sad about it. President Obama did a marvelous job by, with the ACA by waking us all up to this. Carol, thank you so much for the call. When was the last time you looked forward to sitting at your...
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone. You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Here with you, and Cheryl in Bremerton, Washington. Hey, Cheryl, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Speaker.
Hello. Okay. Thank you, Cheryl. Cheryl? I think maybe we lost Cheryl. Okay. I'm going to put Cheryl on hold. Louise, she's on line 4, if you can check that out. Donald in Lincoln, Arkansas. Hey, Donald, what's up?
Hello, Tom.
Hey, Donald, what's on your mind today?
I'm not Lincoln, Arkansas. I live in Lincoln, Illinois.
Oh, okay. Donald, can you take me off speakerphone, please?
Yeah, hang on, please. I'm sorry about that.
That's quite all right. So what's going on?
I want to talk about that healthcare thing that Senate wants to pass. My son's on Medicaid. My daughter's on Medicaid. I'm on dialysis 3 days a week.
Whoa.
And I'm trying to figure, and I'm on Medicare, so is my wife and my mother-in-law. And I wonder what the hell's going to happen with this.
People will die. I hope you're not one of them, Donald. But that's if the Republican and the conservative billionaires' vision of America is achieved, where only wealthy people have health insurance or have good health insurance, only wealthy people can afford health savings accounts, only wealthy people can afford concierge medicine. If that happens, then people are going to die. We're going to go back to Harvard University pointed out that before Obamacare, we had 45,000 Americans every year who were dying. Now we're down to around 15,000 Americans every year who are dying, and those are mostly in the red states that did not expand Medicaid. And I don't have any good news, Donald, other than that if your lives are on the line, it's probably a really good idea to get as politically active as you can right now.
I have been. I've been very political active here in this town.
Good.
And I'm trying to get more political active. I'm trying to get more people to vote Democratic instead of Republican, because I've never voted Republican. I'm not for the Republicans. Never have been.
Yeah. It's pretty grim what they're doing, what they're up to. Donald, thank you for the call, and thanks for sharing your story with us. It's stories like yours that hopefully will change the hearts of these people. We'll see, but hopefully. Donald, thank you. I wish you the very best. Charlotte in Ramona, California. Hey, Charlotte, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I just had a quick question. Last week you were talking about the high-risk pools and Marco Rubio, and I just wonder, how did that get through? Did the Democrats not see that being into this omnibus bill or whatever it was?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. It was an amendment that was put in by Marco Rubio. I believe it was the day before the vote. And most of these amendments are written in such arcane language that you have to spend, in some cases, a day or two looking. It'll say something like, in 45 Code of Federal Regulations 1222-3, the word "or" shall be replaced with the word "maybe," or things like that, right? And every single piece of it just refers to something. And so then you have to go look up each one of those individual laws to see what the hell the bill is about. And so, it just slipped by. Nobody even realized what was going on, and other than Marco Rubio and a few of his Republican buddies who got it in there. And that's what happened to the risk corridors, and that was the beginning of the unraveling of Obamacare in red states in particular. It's still doing fine in places like California, where they're actually enforcing the law fully.
So there was really no way anybody could see it because it was done just the day before the vote.
Well, I'm not sure if it was literally the day before the vote, but it was very close in. There's a great New York Times article about it. If you just Google Marco Rubio risk corridors or plug that into the New York Times search engine, it'll pop right up. And I've tweeted it and written about it. In fact, for that matter, if you Google Marco Rubio risk corridors and my last name, you'll find several articles that I've written about it, and all of them have links in them to that New York Times article. So that'll get you there.
Tom.
Okay, thanks a lot, Charlotte. Great to hear from you. Tony in Philadelphia. Hey, Tony, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good. What's up?
Good. Tom, I have a
brief question maybe you could shed some light on, and I don't like getting into hindsight issues at all, but going back to when the Affordable Care Act bill was initially passed, do you think maybe, I mean, now seeing what we're dealing with and we kind of risk losing it all, we would have been better off going with more of a regulatory policy than a complete overhaul?
No.
In terms that, do you think maybe we would have been better off looking back at it now, saying, go more with, we're going to cap the premiums of the insurance, the prices, and do things like you just can't drop people for pre-existing conditions and things of that nature?
If they did that, Tony, the health insurance companies would just go out of business. I mean, you know, they have to make a profit. They have to have that 25% margin. Now, I realize Medicare and Medicaid operate on a 2 or 3% margin because they're nonprofit organizations, they're government agencies. But the for-profit insurers, if they're going to continue to exist, have to make that 25% that is allowed now by law, by Obamacare. Some of them were making 30, 35, 40%. I mean, they were really seriously ripping us off before Obamacare. Obamacare put a cap, 25% for the big insurance companies, and I think it's 20% for the biggest insurance companies. You know, a regulatory approach just wouldn't have worked. You had to bring new money into the system. If you're going to expand, if we're going to add, you know, 50, 60, 70 million Americans, give them health insurance, people who didn't have health insurance before, you actually have to pay for it. You can't just demand that the health insurance companies do it.
Absolutely.
So we had to come up with the taxes on the billionaires, and that's what the billionaires have been pushing back on. And I believe that's why, you know, the Kochs had started their Generation America with the creepy Uncle Sam ads with the speculum and the rubber gloves and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that's what happened. Tony, thanks for the call. Brian in Hulbert, Oklahoma. Hey, Brian, got a minute and a half. What's up?
Hello, Tom. I wanted to talk about health savings accounts. The conversation that you had with the gentleman a little bit earlier, the libertarian gentleman.
Julio, yeah.
It got me thinking about health savings accounts. Democrats almost never say anything about them. And, you know, it sounds like a great idea. Set a little bit aside of money so you can help yourself when you get sick. But if you look into them a little bit further, you can just figure out that they're a tax-advantaged financial vehicle that you can tie into mutual funds.
Right.
So, I mean, at the catastrophic worst of that, could that kind of be like if enough people get into these health savings accounts on maybe a smaller scale, like mortgage crisis, it seems like something like this could be fodder for another balloon.
Well, it could be, yeah. The health savings accounts are basically a scam. They're designed to help the upper middle class, you know, people with an income over $100,000 a year, basically, and very wealthy people. And it's just another tax dodge. And, you know, because in modern America, anybody who gets health care these days has some sort of co-pays or, you know, things like that. And you can pay for that out of the health savings account. But you're right. You can take that money in the health savings account and you can invest it. And so, and it's tax-free money to begin with. And so, although there are some fairly rigorous rules around that, but it's just a scam for rich people. And they're trying to tell poor people, oh, well, if you just set $5,000 a year aside, you know, people who literally, if they had a $400, $500 bill, they can't pay it for years. I mean, you know, you just set $5,000 aside, you'll be fine. Right. Brian, thank you for the call.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. It's 28 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Crash of 2016, which even though it's 2017, this book is actually more relevant than ever before, and I think one of my most important books. This is from the introduction. I was around 10 years old, a total science fiction junkie. Amazing Stories, a pulp magazine of science fiction short stories, commentary, and science news arrived every month, and that meant that on that day, all homework and play were forgotten. These were some of the most brilliant stories written for a penny a word by people such as Robert Silverberg, Jack Vance, Poul Anderson, and Frank Herbert, who would go on to become the biggest names in the field of fantasy and sci-fi. And one particular story haunted me for years. 8 years later, when the first men landed on the moon, that story brought back to me as if I'd read it the day before. In the story, a group of astronauts are finally, for the first time, going to blast off from Earth and circle the moon. It had never been done, and because our moon doesn't rotate on its axis like we do relative to the sun, but instead circles us with a single side always facing us, nobody had ever seen the dark backside of the moon. These men would be the first in human history to do so. The rocket roared to life from the launch pad, the astronauts chatting with mission control as they hurtled toward the moon. When they got close enough, they let the moon's light gravity grab their space capsule, and with a few deft rocket thrusts, they put themselves into orbit around it. They were unbelievably excited, as were the NASA folks on the ground, chattering back and forth about what they hoped and expected to see. Was the dark side of the moon identical to the front, or was it more mountainous? Might it be frozen water there, since it has a different exposure to the sun? Might there even be wreckage there from ancient astronauts or something else exotic like that? Anything was possible. As the astronauts began their turn around the backside of the moon, Mission Control told them they'd lose communication because the giant mass of the moon would block their signals, so they prepared for radio silence. But as they made the turn, they could still hear Mission Control. What they saw as they glimpsed behind the face of the moon, we see on full nights, brought an audible gasp from all of them. One picked up the microphone to radio the ground and tell the horrible story. Another knocked the microphone from his hand with a warning gesture. They continued to circle around the backside of the moon, and the view became clearer and clearer and even more ever more undeniable. Should we report it? A debate, virtually a fistfight, broke out in the capsule. What would it mean for Earthlings? What if nobody believed them? What if they were quarantined upon returning and imprisoned or sent to a mental hospital? I remember what they saw that was so horrifying to the astronauts. The backside of the moon was missing. They were looking into a concave half ball of the front side of the moon, which was made of canvas stretched over an elaborate superstructure of 2x4s nailed together like the scaffolds that held up roller coasters from that era. This science fiction story from my childhood also tells the story of America today on the verge of the crash. On the surface, everything seems okay. Our politicians still talk about promise, hope, and change, and we applaud and feel inspired. The world still uses our money. We still have the strongest military in the world, and our standard of living is still far better than the third world's, though worse than most of the developed world's. We're still by far the wealthiest nation in the world with too many billionaires to count. We still have civility in the streets. We have reality TV and fancy cars. We still vote, at least those with a driver's license and birth certificate. As long as you don't look too closely at our nation, things seem under control. The United States looks whole. The economically, militarily, and scientifically superior United States, as we've come to know it in the past 80 years, seems intact, not only for the whole world to see, but from afar, but also for those of us who live here. But when you go back around the dark backside of our nation, you see the shocking truth. There you see a nation whose core fundamentals have been hollowed out, replaced by balsa wood stilts, and wrapped in a frayed canvas of nationalism and bravado, a cloak similar to that worn by nearly every great superpower that has ever existed on the planet just before its own eventual collapse. Unlike the canvas moon, the United States was once full and complete. Many of us still have memories of that era of the middle class through the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. But today that middle class, like the canvas moon, has been hollowed out. Middle-class neighborhoods still exist across America, but now they're teetering on stilts of mortgage and credit card debt. As then Labor Secretary Robert Reich testified before Congress in 1994, the net national savings rate, he said, which was at a relatively robust 8.2% of GDP during the 1970s, has dropped to a barely visible 1.8% in the early 1990s. That was just a decade and a half into the Reagan Revolution. Today, it's far worse. The AP headline from February 11, 2009 says it all. Americans have negative savings rate. Hollowed out, too, is our nation's democracy. The spectacle of national elections confronts us every other year, but behind the pomp and circumstance, our democracy has been corroded into an oligarchy as billionaires finance their own political candidates and corporate-funded think tanks do the work once reserved for elected officials in writing and passing legislation. Stripped clean and hollowed out, the United States is more vulnerable today than it's ever been, including during the Great Depression and Civil War. Those fortified pillars that supported a booming middle class are stolen, and without them, America teeters on the verge of the next great crash. Ultimately, this book is a story of how America was dragged into this crash. We are standing today at the edge of the fourth great crash and war in American history. The previous three, each about 80 years apart, were gut-wrenching in their horror and bloodshed, but they ultimately transformed America in ways that made this a greater and more egalitarian nation. The book, The Crash of 2016, The Plot to Destroy America, What We Can Do to Stop It. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Remarkable. The chyron on Fox News right now. White House answers previously asked reporters' questions. Right on MSNBC, it's White House defends Trump's tweets. Oh man! And Ann Coulter has come out and said, "Hey, with this tweet where Trump is talking about Mika Brzezinski, I like Trump again." Hannity is defending it. Joe, you lie, deadbeat dad, Joe Walsh, he's defending it. It's rather bizarre. So, Tom, in Reading, Pennsylvania, it says here you disagree with me, so you go to the top of the pile. What's up?
Yeah, I'm from Media, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I do disagree with you. I think the costs of a single-payer system are just going to make it unfathomable for the middle class, because right now you got 150 million people. Now they get their insurance basically through their employer, and 55 million you have on Medicare. Now Medicare works because you pay into it through a payroll tax many, many years before you're eligible for it. And I think if you go to a Medicare for all system, that the 150 million now that like their health care, they're going to be put in the same pool of, I guess I would say, mediocre service for everybody, mediocre health care. And you would have to really reduce the costs, I think, and salaries not only of doctors but of the nurses, the technicians, the unionized orderlies that work in the system. I think that the cost for someone, say like me, who has health care I'm happy with, and there's far more people that are happy with their health care than there are that aren't. So, maybe you would want to go with a Medicaid system for those that can't afford it, and then buy-ups.
Yeah, well, Medicaid and Medicare are both single-payer health care systems. It's just that Medicaid is funded out of general funds, and Medicare is funded out of the Medicare Trust Fund, which is paid for with FICA taxes and also with the fees that once you're on Medicare you pay. Whereas once you go on Medicaid, you don't pay that monthly fee like you do with Medicare. But, Tom, let me ask you a question. Why do you think it is that Walmart can offer lower prices to consumers than the local mom-and-pop shop?
Several reasons. Number one, they get cheap goods, they buy in quantity, and they have real nasty strong-arm tactics to get people to sell them their product, or they're pretty much out.
Right.
Of the market.
It's buying power. It's buying power. It's because they're buying for probably 600-700 stores in the United States. I don't know how many they have, but a bunch of them. And instead of buying 100 pencils, they're buying 100,000 pencils. Instead of buying 20 bicycles, they're buying 20,000 bicycles, and so they can negotiate a lower price. That's the advantage of a single-payer system. Medicare is a single-payer in terms, they're a single purchaser of stuff that gets resold into their retail store. Excuse me, Walmart is a single purchaser of stuff that gets resold in their stores. And similarly, this is why, while we pay in the United States $8,200 per person per year, that's men, women, children, everybody, right, for health care, in Norway, the next most expensive country in the world, they pay $5,300 because their single-payer health care system is able to negotiate on behalf of all 20, 30 million, however many there are people in Norway. They can buy on behalf of all of them.
Yeah, doesn't Medicaid negotiate? Haven't they negotiated terms so, shall we say, favorable?
Medicaid is not anywhere near as successful as Medicare. Medicare is a federal program, and it's nationally administered. And so Medicare actually operates with a 3% overhead, and their overall costs are dramatically lower than any health insurance company. In fact, the health insurance companies kind of ride on the back of Medicare. Medicare sets up the purchasing standards, and a lot of the health insurance companies say, we will only pay what you pay Medicare. Medicaid, on the other hand, is administered individually by the states. So every state has their own Medicaid program, even though the federal government, with the Medicaid expansion through Obamacare, is giving money to the states to fund their Medicaid programs. It's still state by state. So you've got 50 Medicaid programs. You've got one Medicare program.
I would say Medicare also works because, you know, when you're working, you pay a payroll tax, and so does your employer, and you're paying into it many years than you do when you retire. So basically, it's trying to do what Obamacare does: have healthy people pay in it, you know, before they really need it.
I agree, but the way that Norway and well, basically every other developed country in the world, the other 35 of the 36 developed countries in the world, the way that, arguably with the exception of Switzerland, which does it as an entirely nonprofit system, but you know, the norm among civilized and developed countries is that everybody's taxes go up a little bit, particularly very, very wealthy people. And in exchange for the, and then you also actually buy the insurance policy. You know, it's I don't know the exact numbers. I've had callers tell me that in Canada, we had one caller say that for his family, it was $140 a month for access to the single-payer healthcare system. We had a caller from Mexico who said it was $120 a month to access the single-payer healthcare system in Mexico. But typically, you have to also pay into the system. And so that does the same thing as the payroll tax with Medicare. Although, you know, it's not accumulating on the front end. I get that.
You don't pay anything into the system. Is that not correct?
I'm sorry, say that again?
If you have no income or a very small income, you're going to pay little or nothing.
That's correct.
So therefore,
that's correct.
There's going to be a huge shift in costs here to the middle class if you get Medicare benefits rather than Medicaid, because now you're going to get Medicare benefits with, probably because they can't afford it, no co-pays, and they would have to say maybe you don't get the single room in a hospital that I get with my insurance now. I think people that have good insurance that they like now are going to either have to pay more for it or get much less quality of service, because Medicare,
this is how it works in all these other countries, Tom, is you get, I mean, you can call it mediocre service. I'd say in the United States we have something worse than mediocre service. You know, particularly just having gone through back surgery, having to wait literally weeks in excruciating pain just to get a doctor's appointment. And I had to go through like 4 different specialists before the surgeon would actually do the surgery. And every one was, oh, you have to wait another month. I mean, I ended up waiting a total of at least 4 or 5 months to get this surgery while I was in pain, while I was, you know, taking drugs for pain and trying to do a talk show. And it was nuts. I mean, you know, we've got, you talk about mediocre health care. It's happening right here in the United States.
See, that's not
but what happens and by the way, those kind of waits, by and large, don't exist for people who are actually in acute pain in most countries that have single-payer healthcare systems. But in those countries, you will find insurance companies. And those insurance companies say, you know, hey, if you're wealthy enough, you know, for an extra $1,000 a month for a health insurance plan, we will guarantee you a single bedroom rather than, you know, a 2-bedroom thing. We will guarantee, you know, we will fly you from anywhere in the world. You know, if you want to pay $5,000 a month, if you're really rich, we'll guarantee you, you know, catered meals with 5-star cuisine that's all organic and you know, I mean, there are some really absurd programs out there that you can find in some of these European countries.
And you would support that in this country then, even if it means you'd be jumping ahead of the line?
I have no problem with, you know, with rich people using their riches to get whatever they can get, right? It's as long as it's not hurting the rest of us.
Well, that's what they would say. If you're jumping ahead, you're hurting the rest of us. I know Canada has a deal where you can only, insure for services not given to the general public, so you can't decrease.
That's correct. In fact, Canada, up until about 5 or 6 years ago, had banned private health insurance, and then they changed it so that. But see, but by and large, what those private systems are paying for is actually not. You're not jumping ahead in the line of everybody else. You're jumping into a whole separate system. There are private for-profit hospitals. There are concierge docs. And this is actually exists right here in the United States right now. It's just, you know, there's concierge doctors in this town. There's concierge doctors all over the country, you know, who you pay a couple $1,000s a year to, and they limit their practice to 100 patients or 200 patients or something like that. But,
Yeah, and I'm a middle-class employee. You know, with the railroad, I've got good insurance, which we sacrifice wages and benefits for. I've never had the experiences that you have. I don't know what kind of insurance you've had, but I've had elective surgery. I've had.
It wasn't my insurance. It's that I live in Washington, D.C., which is this incredible boom town. And, I mean, when we first moved here, Louise couldn't find a doctor, and she has to take, this thyroid thing for her thyroid. Every doctor said, go to the ER. I mean, it took 6 months to even get a doctor in this town. It's nuts. Tom, I got to run, but thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls right after this. Stick around. Welcome back. Joel in Jacksonville, Alabama. Hey, Joel, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Great to speak with you again. When you were talking earlier about the ACA vote or the congressional vote on approving, it fired off an old memory for me. And it turns out, yes, Arlen Specter voted for the ACA at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a Republican, or had been elected as a Republican.
Oh, that's right. And he flipped to being, an independent, a Democrat?
Democrat.
Democrat, yeah.
He announced that he would run as a Democrat in April of 2009.
That's right.
So that may be why they don't include him as a Republican, having voted for it. But.
Yeah. Huh. Very interesting. Okay, thanks for the reminder from the memory hole there, Joel. I appreciate it. I had completely forgotten about Arlen Specter. You're absolutely right. Brian in Dubuque, Iowa. Hey, Brian, what's up? Thanks for watching Free Speech on Dish Network.
Hey, Tom, you're welcome. Thank you. I have a frog in my throat, so please forgive me.
Quite all right. Sounds fine. What's up?
I hope your back is doing well. I'm sorry to hear you had to go through that.
It is doing very well. Thank you very much.
That's excellent. Yeah. Healthcare. Julio, kind of the perfect example of the, Republican or, whatever kind of mindset. The idea that anybody could save up enough money to pay for their health care and a healthcare savings thing. And Julio said, well, if you've got 5 or 6 people in one household all paying into the system, well, how many people have 5 or 6 people in a household that are, they would have to be adults working full time and.
Right. Well, plus his argument is basically do-it-yourself socialism. Let's distribute the cost over a larger number of people. The problem is that 5 or 6 people are never going to be able to contribute enough money to a health savings account to cover $1 million cancer.
Right, and we have enough money to put another $52 billion into what is already over a $600 billion budget for our military, and I'm all for a strong military. My stepbrother from my first stepfather, who was killed when I was 12, my stepbrother is a lieutenant colonel in the Special Forces, and he's over in Qatar right now, and I'm praying for him over there.
Yeah.
I was in a car accident, which was not my fault, not that should matter, but when I was 19, I went to work out in California, and 6 months later, I got into a terrible car accident, and I've been disabled ever since, and I've been living on Social Security disability since about 1988 or 89, and we can spend $52 billion more on the military, but we spend only $32 billion helping people like me who need Social Security disability each year, and couldn't we? I'm living on about a little under $10,000 a year from what I'm getting from the government, and that's before rent and food and
that's got to be a squeeze.
It's hard. But I'm grateful for the help. I mean, I really am. And I'm lucky because I have family who are there for me. But I have my buddy next door who I just got into the apartment next door to me. He's been living for the last 10 years in the worst kind of apartment you can imagine. He's also disabled. and I just got him into this nice apartment next door to mine where I've been living in this building here. It's a 4-flat with 4 apartments. It used to be a house.
Yeah.
And
it's a tough one, Brian. And it must be particularly tough, knowing the Republicans think of you as a moocher. I mean, that's terrible. Brian, thank you for the call. Good on you. Welcome back. Kurt in Los Angeles. Hey, Kurt, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Well, lots on my mind, and while I'm on hold, you go through so many topics that it brings up other things. But I think the main point I want to say is that ever since 2012, I've seen a repeat of history occurring, and I've sent you links and stuff through email, and I don't know if you ever looked at them or checked them out or whatever, but I think the GOP, those are in charge, not the pawns like the gentleman you spoke to earlier trying to argue health care. Those people are just people who have bought into the Koch brothers network and are just getting paid to just go follow lockstep with the idea of whatever libertarianism is or whatever. They're just pawns, but the people who are really pulling the strings here. I'm just getting this sick feeling that they're trying to turn America into one big giant concentration camp. I mean, you got this wall. He wants a wall, put this wall around to separate us from Mexico. In about 4 or 5 years, I don't see that wall being an instrument to keep immigrants out. I see it as an instrument to keep Americans in, because they are turning this into a very miserable place to live if this health care bill goes through. Like you say, people are going to die.
Wow. Turning us into East Germany.
Yeah, well, East Germany, and then while I'm on hold, I try to go to Wikipedia and look up some history so I can try to have some reference material. And in 1933, when Himmler set up the first concentration camp at Dachau, initially it was a place to house just political enemies of Hitler, and just to the media, and just to kind of make it to where people didn't speak out against what was going on. Similar to how the first thing Trump did when he got into office was Spicer was shunning and walking out on press conferences, not answering questions, and you had that one press conference where the media was like Sean, when he turned his back on them, they had him completely trained like wet dogs. And then Trump was pointing his finger saying the media is liars. Then he had this big meeting with all the heads of those companies. Then all of a sudden, all the media started getting a little bit nicer. Now there's articles here and there will still criticize him, but you notice these I think for the last 2 weeks he hadn't even had a press conference or something. I mean any interviews, Trump. But anyway, he shuns the media. All right. He has. I don't know if they've locked anyone up. Oh yeah, they locked up the lady for laughing.
Yeah, you're right.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how it starts. But then 4 years later, by 1937, those concentration camps started incarcerating anyone who the Germany saw as any person's other. Let me see here. Anyone deemed to be undesirable member of society. Okay, and that could be racial terms, it could be political terms, it could just be anything. Yeah. And then as people started to get sick in these camps, okay, you got to go to Netflix and watch some of these documentaries that I've watched.
Yeah, Kurt, I'm going to ask you to just wrap this up, because there's a bunch of other people that would like to get in here, and I got about 4 minutes left in the show. What's the point that you're making? Well,
the point that I'm making is after they rounded up all these people needed health care. They didn't think about that far. All right? And when people started dying, they weren't dying fast enough. So Himmler came up with the final solution. How long is it going to take America to realize what's going on to us? And do we need to wait for a final solution to come up from these people to realize we're being suckered?
Yeah, that's a damn good question. Kurt, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm assuming it's a rhetorical question, but if you mean it practically, I don't have an answer. But it's a grim question to ask. Thank you. David in Woodland Hills, California. Hey, David, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's up?
Thank you, Guru. Trump 101, the 3 things you need to know in 15 seconds.
Okay.
Number 1, Believe what he does, not what he says. Number 2, the best way to predict what he'll do next, consider all of the possibilities and pick the meanest one. And number 3, whatever he accuses others of doing, he has already done himself or he is about to do.
Yeah, it seemed your analysis is entirely consistent with my observations of Donald Trump over the last year. Spot on. Trump 101. Thank you, David. Thank you. Betty in Sacramento. Hey, Betty. What's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Louise said to be fast, so I will. First of all, thank you for your kindness and brilliance every day. You encourage me. And second of all, my observation is that when the GOP strategy was to secure 100 years of dominance, I think part of that strategy has been to condition us that when a Democrat is in office, for example, Bill or Hillary, there will be litigation. With Obama, it was just overt racism. And I got reminded of this yesterday because Mitch McConnell is now trying to condition us that we don't need Democrats to legislate. Just leave it to the Republicans. We don't even need to talk to them about the legislation that we're planning. I don't know what can be done about it, but it's something I was observing, and I wanted to mention.
Yeah, I'm starting to wonder if the goal all along was just to cut 8 or 10 million people off health insurance, and they did the 22 million thing so that people would, in your conditioning meme here, Betty, or frame, that people would go, whoa, 22 million? That's a little too many. Okay, 8 billion, we can deal with that. But we'll see. We'll see how this shakes out. But Betty, I think you're right. I think you're right. We are being conditioned. Thank you. John in Champaign, Illinois. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. You know how doctors and nurses and even car insurance, if they kill somebody, they're liable. To me, the GOP, the 13 spatially, putting this bill together, the Democrats need to get wording in there. They need to get insurance for the people that are going to be dying.
Right. So
they're liable for their deaths.
Oh,
by not having insurance.
Yeah, well, typically the way that we hold politicians responsible is not by prosecuting them, but by voting them out of office. And that, frankly, is the thing that these Republicans are most worried about. And the calculus that they're doing right now is, okay, if we give, the billionaires a tax cut, then the billionaires will throw millions of dollars into my campaign to run for office. And they'll say, they'll lie, they'll cheat, they'll steal, they'll do whatever's necessary to get me elected. And on the other hand, if I don't give these billionaires this tax cut, then, the people are going to hold me accountable. I mean, it's like they're trying to figure out where to go with this. So
it's the biggest tax increase on the poor and the middle class by what they're going to have to buy.
Yeah. Well, and that's been going on for a long, long time. I mean, this is the genesis of trickle down of Reaganomics. Reagan raised taxes on working people and the poor 18 times, and he cut taxes on the very, 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 very wealthy. I don't know how many times, but he took the top tax rate from 74% down to 25%. So, and every time a Republican comes into, George W. Bush came into office, cut taxes on really, really rich people. It cost us $1 trillion during the 8 years of his presidency. It did not stimulate the economy. In fact, if anything, it led to a froth and a crash, a bubble and a crash. And that's typically what you get when you do tax cuts, is you get bubbles and crashes. When your top tax rate is above 50%, you have a stable economy. And there's no shortage of good economic history that proves this. John, thank you for the call. And thank you all for being with us today. Thank you so much for listening, watching, whatever it may be. I really, truly appreciate it. Please support however you get this show. And, let them know that you're listening or watching. And don't forget, especially tomorrow, I mean, McConnell's going to pull some sneaky thing here. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. I'll see you tomorrow. We'll find out what he's up to.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by EcoWine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, EcoWine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.